Chapter 541, Ghosts Leave the Mountain 1. The two hands below that gentleman are strange. They're even wearing strange things. Can such hands really grab the stalagmites? Sir, be careful, you'll fall. The four hands did not know what shoes were, nor had they seen feet. These two words were not in their dictionary at all. They were extremely curious when they saw Jiang Li's feet under his robe. However, at the same time, they were worried that he would fall and die. After all, Jiang Li's endless supply of sea beast meat had given them a huge advantage. It would be a pity if he died just like that. Jiang Li naturally did not listen to their dissuasion. After he stepped into the stalagmite area ahead, the world in his vision suddenly reversed. It was as if the entire netherworld fragment had been flipped over. It was not that he was stepping on the ground, but the entire ground was pressing down on his head. Below him was the churning black clouds and the endless netherworld void. Jiang Li's foot only lightly tapped on the stalagmite, and he was quickly captured by the inverted gravity. His figure floated in the air and was about to fall. Come! At this moment, a vine grew out from beneath Jiang Li's feet. It coiled around the stalagmite and hung him in midair. The four-handed young men in front of him had already crawled further and further away, but Jiang Li still remained on the spot, hanging there. He looked rather sorry and overestimated himself. However, Jiang Li was still calm and unhurried. His body began to emit a strange fluctuation that outsiders could not see. It was the inverted domain that came from the same source as this place. This power that could overturn heaven and earth was the natural reversal domain of this place. This was only the outer area of the Back Yin Mountain and had not really entered the mountain area. What he came into contact with was only the inverted domain. A little bit of the power was reflected, but it still shocked Jiang Li greatly. Previously, his inverted domain had all come from the cultivation of the 9 Nether Dao scripture in the underwater graveyard. What he comprehended were only some of the memories of the 9 Nether main branch when it lived in the Back Yin Mountain. It was already extremely lucky that he could barely cultivate the inverted domain. How could the memories of the ancient times that had been passed down until now be so clear? The inverted domain fluctuation on Jiang Li's body began to change continuously. The vine that connected his ankle to the stalagmite slowly relaxed. In Jiang Li's eyes, the world began to return to normal bit by bit. He used his inverted domain to simulate and counteract the effect of the environment reversal. His figure slowly descended from the sky, and his toes tapped the stalagmite again. This time, he could already feel his weight on the tip of the stalagmite. Then he stepped on the stalagmite and walked forward. As he approached the mountain, the effect of the natural domain continued to increase. However, Jiang Li, who had already found the trick, only needed to adjust the fluctuations on his body every time his body was thrown up before falling back down. Come! On his body, there were 2 thin layers of wooden skin. The 2 9 Nether clones separated a tree heart and attached it to him. On the one hand, the environment here might be more helpful to the 2 9 Nether wood than Jiang Li. On the other hand, they were also a layer of insurance for Jiang Li. For example, such a natural inverted domain would not be effective on the 9 Nether wood. This was true even if they did not master the inverted domain. There were also some sinister demons and ghosts. Even if Jiang Li made a mistake and failed, the 2 9 Nether wood could still save the situation in time. As a branch of the spiritual root of heaven and earth here, they were more suitable to deal with the danger here than Jiang Li. Unlike the 4 hands who had to use all their strength to grab the stalagmite to prevent themselves from falling, Jiang Li's movements were simply walking normally and were even more relaxed. Soon he caught up to the people in front. At this moment, a 4-handed person suddenly shattered the stalagmite in his hand and fell into the void with a scream. His mistake seemed to have triggered a chain reaction as several people fell together. Halfway through the journey, many people had already exhausted their strength. The number of deaths would gradually rise from here. Every time such a ceremony happened, there would be a large number of casualties. However, just as they were about to fall into the morning fog sea, vines quickly darted out and hung them in midair. It was Jiang Li who had already walked nearby and saved them. With these vines, as long as they did not fall into the fog, they could climb back along the vines after resting for a moment. The human race was not prosperous to begin with. As the successor of the human emperor, Jiang Li still wanted to try his best to reproduce the former glory of this laborer clan. After all, such hard-working laborers would not be useless no matter where they were. How could he bear to let these young people die in vain because of such meaningless actions? It was unknown who that Granny Nether Mountain was and what method she used to bewitch them. The Four Hands clearly had few people, but they still had to hold a ceremony and use their lives to please her. They even used such a dangerous event as the symbol of heroes. Every four-handed person who participated or had participated would have a higher status in the village. No matter what, this place was the Back Yin Mountain. Even the Four Hands who looked to be above and below could only move around the periphery of the mountain. Chapter 542. Ghosts leave the mountain too. As long as they crossed the boundary, they would still be in danger if they approached. Moreover, the mortality rate was quite high. Jiang Li felt that they were extremely stupid. How could their population grow after holding such dangerous sacrifices all year round? Fortunately, they met him today. Previously, many of the Four Hands had stopped because of fear and the loss of their strength. Some of them had even begun to prepare to return the way they came. However, they were already halfway through their journey, so it was not easy to return. Most of the young people were already in a dilemma. At this moment, Jiang Li took action and saved more than 10 people who should have died. That magical method immediately reduced the sense of danger in their hearts greatly. Their originally sore arms seemed to have recovered their strength. Many people mustered their courage and moved forward again. After resting, the ones who had already fallen pulled the vines back to the hanging stalagmites and continued to climb forward. It was the same for the remaining half of the journey. As long as one of them lost strength and fell, Jiang Li would use the vines to grab them. There was no exception. The continuous successful rescues gave them greater confidence. Without the pressure of death, the four-handed young people better displayed the strength they had trained all year round. In the last section, the number of people who fell decreased. As a result, their results in this ceremony were far better than usual. There was not a single death. The strong Four Hands quickly threw the oil cloth, wrapped around their waists, into a copper basin hanging at the foot of the mountain. In the copper basin, there was originally still a faint flame. After obtaining new fuel, a raging fire immediately burned. This oil had been specially processed and could burn for a long time. All the young Four Hands grabbed the stalagmites and cheered in front of the flames. As for the champion, it was not a man, but a pair of slender four-armed sisters. In this kind of competition that tested stamina even more, nimble bodies often had the advantage. This time, they invested far more fuel than before. The tribe that these sisters belonged to could probably live a long life. However, when they looked back at the elders of their tribe, they discovered that there was no smile on their faces. Instead, their faces were filled with worry and anxiety. "We can't do this. Doing this is fooling Granny Nether Mountain. Something bad will happen." Jiang Li heard their voices from afar. Clearly, there were some things about that Granny Nether Mountain that these young people did not know. At this moment, a cold wind swept over, causing the flames on the copper basin to shake violently. "Four Hands, you've broken the rules." A ghost face formed by countless skeletons appeared in the black clouds above and looked cruelly at the Four Hands below. "Granny, spare us. Granny, please spare our life. If necessary, we old folks offer ourselves. Take our lives instead." The originally decorated ceremony venue was filled with cries. The young people at the end of the mountain were still confused. A large number of demons and ghosts had already flown out of the sky towards the Four Hands village. A moment later, The cold wind and black fog carried the wailing children back. What kind of demon dares to leave the mountain to snatch people? Jiang Li had always hated those human-eating demons, especially those that ate children. He stepped on the immortal slaying flying sword and was about to stop them. However, another gust of cold wind swept past from below, causing the four-handed youths to immediately faint. The four hands who were not tied to vines loosened their grip and fell. Jiang Li could only turn around and weave a vine net to catch them first. However, with this delay, he could only watch as the group of black fog ghosts flew away with hundreds of children. He could use powerful spell techniques to intercept them from afar, but that would definitely injure the fragile four-handed children. It's all because of us that our children were harmed. I want to see the Empress Nether Mountain. I want the children back. At this moment, Jiang Li noticed that there was actually one person among this group of young men who had not fainted, and he held the stalagmite tightly. It was the conjoined sisters who had won the championship. The younger sister was already unconscious, but the elder sister was still holding on. This was because two of the children who had been snatched away were their children. Not only that, but she also wanted to cross the line and truly enter the mountainous area of the Baekyin Mountain. She wanted to climb all the way up the mountain to meet the Empress Nether Mountain that they had worshipped for many years. She wanted to find her child. However, how could the true Baekyin Mountain be as simple as before? As soon as she crossed the boundary at the foot of the mountain, she sensed that something was wrong. The inverted domain here was no longer just as simple as swapping up and down. She wanted to squeeze the stalagmite tightly, but her palm opened wider and wider, as if she wanted to break her fingers. The actions of her body were completely opposite to what she wanted to do. Under such circumstances, she naturally could not persist any longer and directly fell down. She was grabbed by Jiang Li with the vine net and dragged back together. Outside the safe area of the stalagmite, all the four hands were already crying. "It's all your fault. Why did you save them?" Chapter 543, Ghosts Leave the Mountain 3. "It's all your fault for harming our children. Return our children." When they saw Jiang Li return, many families who had lost their children glared at him. Some people stepped forward to question Jiang Li, and they even stretched out their hands with the intention of attacking him. However, before their hands could touch Jiang Li, a terrifying pressure erupted from his body, and it carried a wave of air that directly overturned thousands of people. Pure-blooded dragon, the aura of the human emperor, and the Usuras will fused under Jiang Li's mental pressure, pressing this group of four hands to the ground like mud. Many people rolled their eyes and foamed at the mouth. If not for the fact that Jiang Li had already deliberately restrained himself, he would have crushed them all into mush. They did not dare to resent Granny Nether Mountain, who had really captured the child, but wanted to blame Jiang Li. Did they think he was easy to bully? Jiang Li sympathized with them for having their children captured just now, but that was not a reason for them to be rude to him. In terms of terror, he was not necessarily inferior to that Granny Nether Mountain. "Lord, please put away your divine power." It was not until more than 10 breaths later that Jiang Li slowly restrained his aura. The remaining few people who barely maintained their consciousness were like drowning people returning to the shore, and they felt as if they had been reborn. "Tell me what happened." Under his pressure, only a few village chiefs could barely maintain their consciousness. After the pressure disappeared, they panted and got up from the ground with difficulty. However, they did not dare to be disrespectful anymore. With a humiliated expression, they began to explain to Jiang Li about Granny Nether Mountain. "Lord, this so-called ceremony is actually a sacrifice. The warriors in our village are actually sacrifices. It turned out that 500 years ago, the four hands relied on their tenacious life and hardworking nature to live quite well on this land. Back then, the population even exceeded 1 million. However, at some point, a powerful ghost suddenly occupied the mountain. Then, they frequently brought the ghosts down the mountain to plunder children. The four hands who did not have reliable cultivation methods could not fight back at all. In their grief, the children were taken away in waves. Such a long-term calamity caused the population of the four hands to plummet. It would not be long before they were completely wiped out. Later on, under extreme helplessness, the patriarch of the four hands brought people to ignite a raging fire under the Back Yin Mountain and negotiated with Granny Nether Mountain as a mortal. As sheep that could be slaughtered at any time, there was not much room for negotiation. The negotiation process was naturally very humiliating. It was impossible to make Granny Nether Mountain and the ghosts on the mountain give up on eating people. If they continued to eat like this, the four hands would be completely extinct in 30 years. The threat of losing their food was used against them. In the end, they made Granny Nether Mountain agree to not easily attack their children. As for the four hands, they also had to set up a brazier at the foot of the Netherworld Mountain. They had to keep the brazier burning. Every time the flames in the brazier were about to be extinguished, they would choose strong four hands to throw fuel in. The ones that fell on the way were sacrifices to Granny Nether Mountain. Over the years, this condition caused the number of four hands to decrease. Up until now, there were less than 10,000. However, they did not dare to disobey. They also had to call the clansmen who went to light the brazier heroes and let them die in honor. However, the truth was only spread among the village leaders. As time passed, the young people and children gradually forgot the truth. Their dream since young was to obtain first place for their village in the ceremony. This was the origin of the four hands human sacrifice. Jiang Li's action caused no one to die during the process of adding fuel. One had to know that adding fuel to the brazier was only a reason and excuse to deceive themselves. The true goal was to make the young men in the village take the initiative to die as sacrifices. Jiang Li saved the sacrifice and broke the agreement they had made with Granny Nether Mountain for 500 years. Therefore, the mountain ghosts descended and plundered, directly taking away all the four hands' children. Chapter 544, Do You Want a Wife? 1. In that case, this matter really has something to do with me, Jiang Li sneered. Although he said that, he would not really take the responsibility like a fool. Why would he take on the blame of harming those children? These villagers wanted to blame him previously because they were afraid of the strong and wanted to bully the weak. The four hands were also humans. Humans always had the instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm. They could not deal with the strong, and they did not even have the courage to blame that Granny Nether Mountain. As for blaming an outsider who looked easy to deal with, they would not lose anything. They could even vent the hatred in their hearts, so why not? Unfortunately, the weakling they targeted this time was tougher than they had imagined. After their actions earlier, with Jiang Li's temper, if not for the fact that they were still useful and were rare ancient remnant people, he would have slapped them to death long ago. However, that Granny Nether Mountain kidnapping children in front of the human emperor's successor was really detestable. In this short moment, it made Jiang Li abnormally vexed, and the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Fortunately, he stopped the four-handed villagers in time. Otherwise, they would not be lying here for a few days. I can go up the mountain and save those children. However, you guys. Before Jiang Li could finish speaking, he glanced at the four hands lying on the ground. The village leaders immediately understood and kowtowed to Jiang Li. Lord, thank you for your kindness. You helped us despite the past. If Lord Jiang Li can save the children in our village, the four hands will obey your orders. We'll build a temple and a statue for you, Lord. We'll kowtow every day and light lamps and incense sticks. We won't make any mistakes, Lord. As expected of the village leaders, they were very sensible and directly said what Jiang Li wanted. Jiang Li's ability to defeat all of them, without even moving his hand, had already convinced them. They could not compare who was stronger between Granny Nether Mountain and this powerful traveler. However, to have such an expert stand up for them, this was already their last hope. If those hundreds of children were all eaten, the hopes of these thousands of people would be broken. After hundreds of years of bitter struggle, it was still a meaningless tragedy in the end. It was better to fall into the abyss together. Lord, that Granny Nether Mountain likes to use our clansmen to invite the ghosts and demons on this 10,000-mile back Yin Mountain to eat. It's a banquet of living people. It's only been 3 days since the full moon rose. However, Lord, without Empress Nether Mountain's approval, no one can go up that mountain. The ghosts like to eat living people, so they would not kill them so quickly. There was still a possibility of saving those children. However, on this mountain, yin and yang were reversed, and the laws of the world were reversed. Once he stepped in, he would step out. It was not that there had not been warriors who wanted to go up the mountain to eliminate demons. Ignoring the fact that they were overestimating themselves, for hundreds of years, no one had been able to take a step further at the foot of the mountain. To creatures outside the back Yin Mountain, the natural inverted domain was indeed an almost insurmountable gap. However, Jiang Li did not care about that. His figure flickered in the air, and in a moment he had already crossed the stalagmite area and stepped onto the ground of the back Yin Mountain. The scene of his joints twisting and breaking himself before falling into the void did not happen. Jiang Li only paused for a moment before walking towards the mountain. It was as if the terrifying rules of heaven and earth did not exist on him. Standing in the distance and watching Jiang Li easily step onto the back Yin Mountain, besides being surprised, a trace of hope arose in the hearts of the few awake villagers. Perhaps this lord could really succeed. Their decisive choice, actually, had the consideration of seeking Jiang Li's protection. If Jiang Li could stop Granny Nether Mountain, their future would definitely be 1,000 times better than now. After all, that traveler did not eat people and had a large amount of delicious meat. How noisy! However, there seems to be a place ahead that I can ask for directions. At the foot of the mountain, Jiang Li took out an earth-rank artifact, Xianxing's ear. Coupled with the Bodhisattva Heart Sutra, he wanted to try to find the location of the so-called Empress Nether Mountain. However, this back Yin Mountain was a huge divine landscape that spanned the entire netherworld fragment. The range it crossed was so large that even if his straight-line detection range was 50,000 miles, he could not hear the boundary no matter how hard he listened. On the other hand, he felt a chill in his brain from the cries of ghosts and demons everywhere on the mountain. However, not far ahead of the mountain path, he heard something different. After going up for a while, the terrain gradually became flatter. The path ahead sank into a deep darkness. Under the moonlight, the mountain path could barely be seen. In front of him, it was as if it was swallowed by something, covered in ink-like black. A cold wind blew on the mountain, and the black shadow swayed slightly. If one listened carefully, they could still hear tempting sounds coming from it. There was something familiar to Jiang Li in the place that was enveloped by darkness. However, he could not identify the other party. Chapter 545. Do you want a wife? 2. Young master, you've come a long way. Are you tired? From the black shadow, an old woman slowly walked out. She lowered her head and leaned on her walking stick. Her face could not be seen clearly. She held a green paper lantern in her hand. When Jiang Li looked around again, the road that he could barely see at some point in time was covered in darkness. It was even to the extent that he was unable to see his hands clearly. In such darkness, although the lantern was strange in color, it made people feel at ease for no reason. Young master, don't blame me. It's easy to attract bad things by lighting fire on this mountain. I can only catch some fireflies and barely follow the path. The ground is uneven, you have to be careful. When the old woman approached, through the thin layer of lantern paper, it could indeed be seen that there were more than 10 soybean-sized fireflies lying inside. The green light was emitted by these small insects. Such a reasonable explanation naturally made people feel more at ease. Up ahead is my humble abode. There's only me and my granddaughters at home. If young master doesn't mind, please come and drink a few bowls of tea and stay for a few days?" The old granny did not wait for Jiang Li to reply before turning around and staggering towards the darkness. The other party had just taken a few steps when the surroundings completely darkened. The path behind him and the moon above him completely disappeared. There was only a bit of green fluorescent light left in front of her that swayed with the old woman's footsteps. The instinctive fear of darkness made people want to follow. Jiang Li did not hesitate to follow behind the old lady. The old woman swayed as she walked, but every time he wanted to surpass her, no matter how he accelerated, he did not succeed. He lowered his head to look at the other party's footsteps. The old woman's back was clearly facing him, but the toes under the rough black dress were facing Jiang Li. Decent trick. After seeing so many people with 4 hands, it was not so hard to accept that her feet had turned 180 degrees. Jiang Li was just about to mobilize the power of the earth vein to spar with the other party, but he had only taken less than 100 steps when a unique small building with red gauze curtains hanging everywhere appeared in front of him. The originally decadent voice that made one's blood boil also changed to the silver bell laughter of young girls. From time to time, behind the floating tent, a few graceful young figures flashed past, faintly discernible and making people's imagination run wild. When she noticed that Jiang Li was staring at her granddaughters, the old granny was not angry. Instead, she sighed. "Sigh, it's all my old man's fault for leaving early. The old bull at home also died of illness. Ever since then, he's never been able to leave this mountain again. I'm an old woman. It's one thing for me to guard the mountain. It's a pity that these innocent daughters of the family have yet to find a husband. If I die alone like this, I've really sinned. I'm really sorry I spoke too much. I'm old and my words are trivial. Young master, don't blame me. Young master, go rest in the house first. I'll get those granddaughters to serve you tea." The old woman led Jiang Li into the small building, and then she ran into the room without turning back, leaving Jiang Li sitting alone in the guest room. Since they wanted to treat him to tea, Jiang Li was a reasonable person. How could he come up and shout about killing? He sat casually in the small building. Red candles flickered, and the surrounding red veil swayed with the wind. However, other than that, it seemed that only this small building was left in the entire world. In the outside world, even if one took another step, they would not see it at all. Even he could not discover any clues. He could only use appraisal on the darkness. Not long after waiting in the small building, a few young girls in skimpy clothes walked in shyly. There were a total of 4 girls. The eldest granddaughter wore a red veil, looking beautiful and intelligent. Her second granddaughter wore a blue veil, looking slender and graceful. The third granddaughter wore a green veil, looking elegant and charming. The youngest granddaughter wore a purple veil, looking petite and exquisite. "Young master, the 4 of us made a cup of tea each. If young master can guess who brewed the tea, that sister of ours will be young masters in the future. If young master guesses everything correctly, then the 4 of us sisters can also serve the same husband." They each held a cup of tea and brought it to Jiang Li with anticipation. The fragrance of the tea was moving, and the fragrance of the wine made one's bones go soft. The 4 girls were covered in a few pieces of light gauze that were almost completely transparent. Under the candlelight, their delicate skin was clearly visible. Jiang Li smiled silently. He took the 4 cups of tea and directly drank them all. The fragrance of the tea was mixed with the fragrance of the 4 girls. With Jiang Li's sharp senses, it was not difficult for him to recognize them one by one. The 4 girls immediately blushed. With a cry, they ran back to their room. It was only because Qin Shuman was not around at this moment. Otherwise, she would have jumped out and scolded them. However, to Jiang Li's surprise, this tea was actually not poisonous. This made Jiang Li, who was prepared to attack at any moment, feel as if he had punched cotton. His expression was extremely awkward. Why did this group of people not act according to common sense? While Jiang Li was thinking, the old woman walked in again. Earlier the light was dim, so he did not see clearly. Now, under the red candle, he saw the front of the old woman. She moved her heels forward and pointed her thumb down. One of her eyes was on her chin, and her forehead had two mouths. One of her noses was facing the sky as she spoke, looking strange no matter how one looked at it. However, this person did not feel that there was anything wrong at all. She held a wedding invitation and welcomed Jiang Li with a happy expression. "Thank you, young master, for not despising my granddaughter for being crude. This is their wedding invitation. As long as the young master signs it, the four of them will be yours. If you're lucky, you can give birth to a son and a daughter for young master. If you're not, even serving by young master's side as a servant is much better than dying of old age in the deep mountains. I'm not someone who doesn't know the rules. There's also a dowry for them here. As long as the young master signs it, it'll be yours." The old woman, with a strange expression, handed the wedding invitation to Jiang Li. Then, she led him to the backyard to look at the dowry. Jiang Li took the invitation and looked left and right, but he did not see any problems. Not only was this wedding invitation not a trap to cheat people of their lifespan, but as the old woman had said, as long as he signed his name, the four girls would be his. This was because there were clearly four soul origins sealed in this wedding invitation. To put it nicely, this was a wedding invitation. To put it bluntly, it was the strictest slave contract. Jiang Li was really puzzled. No matter how powerful the merit blessing was, it could not be to this extent. However, what was the other party trying to do? When he went up the back Yin mountain, he was 200% vigilant. Who would have thought that he would be the first to encounter it? He temporarily put away the wedding invitation. He did not believe that they really had no other intentions. He followed the old woman to the back. As soon as he opened the small door in the backyard, a refreshing yin qi assaulted his face. In front of him was a translucent crystal that was more than 2 people tall and in the shape of a skull. Just from the earth-yin spiritual qi that seeped out earlier, Jiang Li could determine that the value of this crystal was absolutely not inferior to top-grade spirit stones of the same weight. Such a large piece could not be exchanged for even if he sold 10 earth-rank artifacts. Moreover, this thing looked very familiar. He must have seen something similar before. Jiang Li used appraisal. Then he suddenly came to a realization and sized up the old woman beside him. He had already roughly guessed the other party's background. No wonder this person was so polite to him. It turned out that marrying her granddaughters was only an excuse. Her true goal was to use Jiang Li to bring this crystal out of the back Yin mountain. "Senior, you're the back Yin mountain's earth spirit, right?" Chapter 546, Route 1. Jiang Li exposed the other party's identity. The old woman standing beside him was obviously stunned. One of her eyes stared fixedly at Jiang Li, and a terrifying yin mountain that was surrounded by ghost qi was reflected in her eyes. A force in Jiang Li's body spontaneously activated, and 5 mountains that were like sharp swords were reflected in his eyes. The two sides looked at each other, and the atmosphere fell silent for a moment. At this moment, the darkness outside the small building seemed to become even denser. However, on her face, the completely flipped facial features made it impossible to see her expression. One of the eyes on her chin seemed to say, "You just noticed." The 2 raised mouths on her forehead seemed to be saying, "You actually saw through me." It was impolite to directly ask about it. However, Jiang Li was not nervous as he looked at the old woman in front of him. Firstly, the back Yin mountain was an ancient immortal mountain that even ancient golden immortals could not easily refine. Before the earth spirits successfully refined their mountain body, their combat strength was quite limited. Secondly, Jiang Li did not sense any hostility from the other party. Young master still saw through me." "Young master, I'm not afraid of being laughed at. I'm indeed the earth spirit." After a moment of silence, the old woman shook her head and accepted Jiang Li's guess. It was no wonder that Jiang Li had sensed a familiar power when he used Shanting's ears to investigate earlier. Now that he thought about it, wasn't it the earth vein? This old woman with inverted facial features was not a demon, but the spirit of the Yin mountain. This back Yin mountain separated yin and yang, and even had a powerful domain effect. It was the strongest mountain range Jiang Li had seen so far. Even the Shu Mountain 5 Elements peak could produce an earth spirit, so what was so strange about the back Yin mountain? Previously, the other party had used a special method to conceal her aura, causing Jiang Li to only feel that it was slightly familiar. It was not until he saw the earth vein heart that he suddenly came to a realization. However, since Jiang Li had already exposed the other party, the old woman no longer hid anything. After sizing Jiang Li up a few times, she similarly spoke. "May I ask which immortal mountain young master comes from? You can actually cultivate a human body and obtain a free body. I'm so envious." Jiang Li revealed a shocked expression, but he was slightly speechless in his heart. The other party clearly recognized him as the earth spirit. Jiang Li could sense the earth vein power in the other party's body, with his earth spirit body. The feeling the other party gave Jiang Li was probably similar. It was even very likely that, when he had just stepped into the back Yin mountain, this earth spirit granny had already sensed the power of the earth spirit body and the earth vein in his body. Because of this, she treated Jiang Li as one of her kind, and then she specially waited on the path he had to pass through, creating such a scene of marrying off her daughter from the deep mountains. Such a grand show of goodwill naturally had other motives. If it was not for Jiang Li, if it was any other ordinary cultivator, the earth spirit would probably not have been so polite. "I come from the 5 Elements Sword Peak. I only have some 5 Elements Sword Chi. It's not an immortal mountain, and it can't compare to Senior's back Yin mountain. This human body was also obtained by chance. Unless there's no other choice, which earth spirit would be willing to abandon its mountain?" Jiang Li did not deny it. If he told the truth and said that he had the power of the earth spirit because he had imprisoned a earth spirit in his body, the two sides might fight in the next moment. He put himself into the perspective of the earth spirit of the 5 Elements peak and spoke a few words. Sure enough, he resonated with the other party. The old woman pulled him back to the guest room and sighed at the lights, complaining about the injustice of heaven and earth. Clearly, the other party was not doing very well in her territory. That thing just now was Senior's earth vein heart, right? If you rashly move the core, your vitality will be greatly damaged. Senior, you. Could it be because of Granny Nether Mountain? Jiang Li chatted with the other party for a long time. After talking about how it felt to be a free earth spirit, he went back to the subject at hand. At the mention of that name, the earth spirit's inverted eye on her chin suddenly emitted a terrifying, ferocious light. It made the surrounding air turn cold. After being angry for a long time, she could only sigh helplessly. "Sigh, my fate is not good. I was clearly the spirit of this earth vein, but most of my body was snatched away by an outsider. If I don't escape now, my final bit of self will probably disappear. I've embarrassed myself in front of young master." In fact, since ancient times, not many earth spirits and local forces could get along harmoniously. After all, they occupied the mountain for the sake of the dense spiritual chi, strong earth veins, and abundant resources here. The main principle of any sect array above the passable level was to seize and use the power of the local earth vein. To the earth spirit, that was basically no different from sucking its marrow. The true earth spirit of the 5 Elements mountain, sealed in the 9th level of the Demon Tower, was a typical example. With the current situation, how could the earth spirit have a good relationship with the local forces? As for the earth spirit, it lived in seclusion all year round. Although it had immense strength, it could not be used and was not good at fighting. It would always be defeated. Those who were lucky were only sealed and could curse in the darkness. Many of the unlucky ones who encountered those with methods had their consciousness erased. Since young master has already discovered my identity, I won't hide it anymore. Chapter 547, Route 2. Young master, since you call me senior, I have a request. When he spoke up to here, the earth spirit stood up and bowed to Jiang Li. Senior, if there's anything, just say it. Don't stand on ceremony. Jiang Li stepped forward to hold the other party's hands, but he noticed that the hands were as heavy as mountains, and he was actually unable to lift them for a time. 3 breaths later, the earth spirit slowly stood up. Do you like those 4 girls? Jiang Li really liked this question. It was not that he was greedy for beauty, but the 4 girls were also extraordinary and were greatly beneficial to him. They are the 4 extreme yin qi born on my back yin mountain, when the yin-yang qi collided with the solar eclipse in the past 5,000 years. They have been attached to the earth vein for more than 1,000 years. By chance, they were able to awaken their intelligence and become spirits. They are extremely beneficial to us earth spirits. The extreme yin qi also has the power of yin-yang harmony. Even us earth spirits can give birth to children with them. First of all, after he became an earth immortal in the future, he had to gather the 3 flowers on his head and condense the 5 qi in his chest. This extreme yin qi was one of the best materials for the 5 qi in his chest. As for the power of yin-yang harmony, it was something that was hard to find in heaven and earth. Some prehistoric variants and immortals who had obtained the Tao with spiritual treasures were originally unique in the world. There should not be the possibility of reproduction. However, as long as one had the power of yin-yang harmony, regardless of whether they were separated or not, or even without the other half, they could reproduce on their own. It was just like how a phoenix had accidentally swallowed the power of yin-yang harmony and gave birth to a peacock. These were all asexual reproduction. Although Jiang Li did not need it for the time being, it was indeed a rare good thing. I'll give the wedding invitation to young master. I only hope that young master can bring the earth vein heart out of the back yin mountain and escape the control of that granny nether mountain. In the outside world, you only need to find a mountain for me that I can barely stay in. The earth spirit finally revealed her goal. She had not done anything to Jiang Li earlier. The 4 spirits formed from the extreme yin qi were indeed rare treasures. This deal was enough to tempt Jiang Li. After reaching out to wipe away the word wedding, he signed his name. The earth spirit old woman opposite him was overjoyed. This could be considered accepting her deal. After signing his name, Jiang Li immediately sensed something. With a raise of his hand, the 4 girls in the attic above often transformed into pure extreme yin qi and flew over. After circling around his hand a few times, they entered and disappeared. After reaching a deal with the earth spirit, Jiang Li did not forget his goal. Senior is the earth spirit of this place. Do you know the origins of that granny nether mountain? Jiang Li naturally wanted to deal with the fellow who occupied the back yin mountain. However, up until now, he only knew the other party's name. He still knew nothing about that person's strength and methods. To be able to occupy a dangerous place like the back yin mountain, the other party's strength was definitely not bad. It was definitely impossible for an earth immortal to escape. Jiang Li did not want to fail here because of his arrogance. Before approaching the other party, it was necessary to know oneself and the enemy. It was just like how a certain monkey king's surnamed son would call out the local earth deity to ask when he did not understand something. As an earth spirit, this entire mountain range seemed to be her body. It was not easy to hide what happened to his body from his master. Even if the earth spirit had been hiding from Granny Nether Mountain, she knew 99% of the demons and ghosts on this mountain like the back of her hand. The earth spirit hesitated for a moment before telling him what he knew. That old demon Nether Mountain was actually formed from a broken root. Jiang Li was originally quite calm, but after hearing this, his expression could not help but tense up. A broken root. The earth spirit did not know why Jiang Li was so agitated, so she could only continue. Young master, you might not know this, but although my mountain has been around for a few years, my intelligence has only been born for more than 5,000 years. Before I developed intelligence, there was a broken root embedded in this mountain range. That old root was extremely old and was entangled in the main branch of the earth vein. However, it had long lost its vitality. At first I didn't care much, but at some point in time, that broken root actually came alive again. It started to extract my earth vein, and even captured countless ghosts on the mountain. It was not until 500 years ago that the tree root finally became strong enough to break out of the ground and call itself Granny Nether Mountain. Its methods are cruel and powerful. It controlled the entire Back Yin Mountain in a short period of time. If I hadn't obtained a treasure in my early years, my intelligence would have been sucked dry. This earth spirit was not the mountain deity who had obtained the Tao during ancient times. Instead, it was reborn 3,000 years after the spiritual Qi recovery. Therefore, she could not tell what the huge tree root was. It was different from all the plants on the Back Yin Mountain. However, Jiang Li had a bad guess. If the huge root that had been passed down in ancient times was really as big as the earth spirit described, it could not be such a coincidence. In the netherworld, the sunlight could not enter, so it was even darker during the day and was not suitable for traveling. The next day, when the moon rose again, a sedan flew out of the small building in the darkness. The four charming and beautiful figures were not sitting in the sedan, but carrying it. The four of them looked weak and powerless, but the sedan was as light as a piece of paper in their hands as they rushed up the mountain. For some reason, the small sedan was still enveloped in darkness. It was as if all the light that approached this place would be swallowed by something and disappear, making it impossible to see the figure on the sedan. The person sitting in the sedan was naturally the only alliance leader of the Great Mountain Alliance, the current city lord of Fengdu City. Jiang Li sat calmly on the sedan and enjoyed the service of the four new maidservants. He was still in the mood to leisurely poke a paper lantern hanging beside him. Inside, a special black flame was burning. As the black flame swayed, the black layer of darkness on the sedan also swayed. It turned out that the black color that enveloped him was actually the flames emitted by this flame. It was a type of spiritual fire born on the Back Yin Mountain. It was called the lightless fire. According to the tradition of the Yin Mountain, everything here had to be the opposite of normality. Ordinary flames would light up the surroundings when burning, but this lightless fire was the complete opposite. In the area enveloped by its flames, it would fall into darkness. Jiang Li could not understand if it absorbed the surrounding light or if it would really release black flames. In short, all probing methods would be greatly reduced under the envelopment of this darkness. The darkness that enveloped the small building earlier originated from this. In the past 500 years, the Back Yin Earth Spirit could hide the core of its mountain range under the nose of Granny Nether Mountain because of this kind of heaven and earth spiritual fire. The other party originally wanted to use the cover of the lightless fire to let Jiang Li escape with the earth vein heart and go as far as possible. However, not only did Jiang Li not leave, he even had to participate in that person's full moon banquet. The earth spirit had no choice but to give Jiang Li a wisp of the flames to protect himself. With this small flame, it might not be of much help in battle, but when hiding, it was too useful. After walking for a few hours, he saw a cliff in front of him. It was straight, smooth, and impossible to climb. Only on the broken arm were thick purple vines that seemed to be able to climb up the cliff. However, if he really climbed up those vines, he would probably die without a burial ground like the skeletons under the cliff. Young master, the purple vine cliff is ahead. The old demon on it is a general under Granny Nether Mountain. He must have an invitation. Chapter 548, Dream Weaver 1. He looked at the vines that covered the stone walls. In the middle of the entire stone wall, there was an especially thick vine that directly connected the top of the cliff to the bottom. From it, one could sense a powerful aura. Its strength had probably reached the Demon King realm. However, he was still sleeping. If he woke up, it would probably take some effort to deal with him. Jiang Li did not intend to silently cross this stone wall. He had specially come here after carefully understanding the situation of the Back Yin Mountain from the Back Yin Earth Spirit. He was naturally prepared to deal with these vines. He grabbed a sea beast corpse from the coffin and threw it at the stone wall covered in vines. Before the corpse could touch the stone wall, a large number of vines darted out and wrapped around the corpse in the air, forming a huge dumpling stuck to the stone wall. Then the 10,000 kilograms heavy corpse quickly collapsed like a deflated ball. This purple vine looked no different from ordinary plants on the surface. However, if one flipped it over, they would discover that the side that was stuck to the stone wall was filled with rows of tiny teeth that could crush everything. In just a few breaths, it was eaten until only bones were left, casually scattering at the bottom of the cliff. The nature of this carnivorous vine looked even greedier than the blood-sucking wood. After eating the sea beast, the vines on the stone wall were still not satisfied. Instead, it stimulated their desire to eat. The leaves that were sharper than blades rustled, as if they were searching for the smell of food in the surroundings. However, Jiang Li could sense that they had still not woken up. It was only the reaction instinct of the plant body. He was not stingy about this. Another sea beast with a round stomach was thrown over. More vines could not wait to reach out and fight. However, this time, after the vines ate the surface flesh, their movements suddenly slowed down. A large amount of clear liquid flowed out from the cracks of the vines, spreading a dense wine fragrance in the air. Jiang Li filled the sea beast's stomach with high concentration of alcohol in advance. A large amount of wine flowed down the stone wall and was greedily absorbed by the vines. Then, the originally excited vine demon slowly calmed down. Even plants would get drunk. Seeing that it was indeed effective, more sea beasts that were filled with wine were thrown to the stone wall by Jiang Li with brute force. Every sea beast could make a large number of vines drunk. After Jiang Li threw out the 133rd sea beast, all the purple vines began to become loose, as if it was not a problem. At this moment, a ball of liquor fire spirit flame shot out and landed on the stone wall that was filled with the fragrance of wine. Immediately, the entire stone wall lit up with a raging fire filled with the fragrance of wine. As if because they were drunk, the vines had no intention of escaping. They only instinctively felt pain and twisted their bodies under the flames. However, this drunken fire was not as useful as he had imagined. Soon the cold wind on the mountain swept up, and the flames quickly decreased. Apart from the relatively fragile leaves being burned, most of the vines exposed below were only yellow. There were not many that were truly burned to death. The plants on the Back Yin Mountain were more yin attribute than wood attribute, and they were not countered by flames like ordinary plants. As for the liquor fire spirit flame, it would also be strongly suppressed in this land of extreme yin and could not unleash its normal power. Not only did the fire not have a decisive effect, it even angered the thickest vine on the stone wall. The vines that were deeply hooked into the stone cracks twisted like the limbs of a centipede. A large number of rock fragments fell. After the thick vine left the stone wall, it twisted nimbly like a dragon. The sharp leaves that emitted a metallic luster shook, and a human voice sounded. "Who is it?" The purple vine demon Shipan had been very unhappy recently. As one of the 8 Nether Mountain demons under Granny Nether Mountain, although he looked impressive outside, he had always been under a lot of pressure in the workplace. Some time ago, he had heard that one of the other 8 demons, his nemesis, had obtained a moon well that could condense the moonlight from somewhere. He was even prepared to offer it to the granny at this full moon banquet. In comparison, he, who had only prepared a 500-year-old ginseng, would undoubtedly embarrass himself at the banquet. If his opponent spoke ill of him at that time, it was not impossible for Granny Nether Mountain to eat him if she was unhappy. Therefore, during this period of time, he had been considering whether he should cut off a portion of his true essence as a gift to the granny. Splitting his true essence would undoubtedly cause his vitality to be greatly damaged. It might not be able to recover even after hundreds of years. However, if he did not do this, his outcome might not be any better. While he was still feeling conflicted under the moonlight, someone actually came to find trouble with him the night before the full moon. Although the fire did not burn him, it was enough to arouse his anger. Thick vines peeled off the stone wall, clearing away the purple color. His descendants were all drunk and could not wake up. He actually had to deal with a small matter like invading the enemy himself. This made him even angrier. Chapter 549, Dreamweaver 2. The purple vine coiled in front of Jiang Li, and it quickly formed a tall human figure that looked down at Jiang Li's sedan that was enveloped in darkness. He could not see the details, but he knew all the experts on this mountain. Since he could not recognize them, they were definitely weak. Where did this mountain kid come from? You're courting death. The right hand formed from vines suddenly stretched out and smashed towards the sedan. However, Jiang Li did not attack. The four girls, red, blue, green, and purple, lightly tapped their toes and carried the sedan away. Take him down, but don't kill him. Yes, young master. The sedan was still floating in the air, and the four figures had already flown out. Wild mountain ghosts, are you looking down on me? Pan heard the voice in the sedan and was immediately furious. After retracting his fist, he opened his fingers and swung them. Dense vines stretched out and formed a large purple net in the air, wanting to capture these ghosts. Once they were enveloped by his vine net, the countless sharp teeth under the vines could easily crush everything. However, four streaks of light, red, blue, green, and purple, flashed past and immediately cut the vine net that enveloped down from above into countless pieces. The vines that were as tough as profound rank artifacts were actually so vulnerable in front of the four shadows. After tearing apart his vine network, the four shadows did not stop. They approached him and directly cut off a vine arm. Damn it, who sent you? In just a moment, a tenth of his vines were cut off. They had ill intentions. Pan immediately became vigilant. Who on this mountain wanted to attack him? Could it be his mortal enemy? Without giving him a chance to think, the four figures returned. If he was struck a few more times, even if he had a tenacious vitality as a purple vine, his vitality would be greatly damaged this time. He made a prompt decision and directly removed his left hand. He transformed into his main body and threw it out, turning it into layers of vine walls in an attempt to block the four streaks of light. He turned around and ran towards the stone wall that he had stayed in for many years. He had only taken a few steps when the vine wall behind him was already cut into pieces. In the next moment, the four flying swords had already pierced into his body. The vine demon's human body was only formed by vines and did not have any vital points. However, sharp sword chi was continuously surging in, cutting off a large portion of his body. At the moment of life and death, he collided with the stone wall. Rings of purple vines spread out on his head, emitting a unique fluctuation. Immediately, countless drunken purple vines instinctively surged towards him. They swam into his body along the vines that spread out, wrapping his human body larger and larger. In just a few breaths, he was like a giant. The vine's aura also rose sharply. From a peak-level demon, it rose all the way to the demon king level. Then the situation instantly reversed. The four girls who stabbed their flying swords into his body wanted to pull out their swords and leave, but they could not do it no matter what. Instead, they were drowned by the vines that had increased by more than 10 times, sucking them into four pink skeletons. Then Pan looked at the pitch-black sedan. He raised his right hand high, and the vines above surged, forming the shape of a hammer. The vine hammer descended from the sky and shattered the sedan, revealing an old woman who was heavily injured and vomiting blood. Haha, so you're the Bakyin Mountain Earth Spirit. If I hand you over, I'll definitely be recognized by Granny Nether Mountain. The huge purple vine demon, Pan, laughed under the moonlight. Then he carried the Earth Spirit and participated in the full moon banquet to receive the reward from Granny Nether Mountain. With the help of the spiritual fruit rewarded by Granny Nether Mountain, he had truly broken through to the Demon King realm. After that, he rose up and finally married Granny Nether Mountain. Outside the Purple Vine Demon's dream, Jiang Li watched the progress of the dream with a helpless expression. The Purple Vine was a plant that was both male and female. He and Granny Nether Mountain were finally together. Then, who would be the one licking whose pollen in the future? However, ignoring Xipan's strange dream, this kind of talent that could directly increase strength was really very powerful. Jiang Li had seen many abilities that could increase quantity. However, it could cause such a qualitative change through quantity. It could even reach the ability to directly cross over to the Demon King realm. That was very rare. It was precisely because of this method that Xipan became one of the 8 Nether Mountain demons. After learning this information from the Back Yin Mountain spirit, Jiang Li firmly believed that he was the easiest to deal with among the 8 Nether Mountain demons. This was because his essence had not reached the Demon King realm, so it was impossible for him to maintain the fusion state at all times. Under the unexpected circumstances, Jiang Li successfully invaded the dream. In fact, from the moment he lit the liquor fire spirit flame, it was already the Purple Vine Demon's dream. On this mountain filled with enemies, how could Jiang Li light a fire openly? In the beginning, Jiang Li used the diluted soul dissolution liquor and the dream weaving skill to make this large group of vine demons fall asleep. Then, through weaving a dream, he could lure the Purple Vine Demon to use its ability in the dream. This way, Jiang Li's dream clone could learn and imitate it. For example, this fusion had many methods. Jiang Li took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and continued to weave a dream for it, causing the Purple Vine Demon to continuously fall deeper and deeper into the dream. To make a powerful person sink into a dream, one had to use techniques. Just stuffing all kinds of good things into his dream would make people feel bored. During this process, Jiang Li still needed to mix some appropriate hardships and hard cultivation into him. This was like falling in love. The more one invested in this dream, the more unwilling they were to give up. The longer he stayed in the dream, the more his rationality would become blurry. As long as there were no major mistakes, he could trap the other party in the dream. 6 hours later, Jiang Li heaved a sigh of relief and retreated from the dream. This fellow would definitely not wake up in 3 to 5 years. Then let me borrow this body for the time being. With a thought, the dream clone began to control the Purple Vine Demon's body to sleepwalk. He emitted that special fluctuation and forcefully gathered all the purple vines to fuse. Its speed was slightly slower than the original. However, in next to no time, an enormous vine giant still appeared before Jiang Li. With a wave of his hand, he put away the 4 maidservants. Jiang Li carried the lantern and walked into the body of the huge Purple Vine Demon. The rock that had fused with all the purple vines on the stone wall was extremely huge and could leave a comfortable space inside. He stabbed the lantern to the side. This thing could cover his aura. After that, Jiang Li directly created a small bed in the inner space of the vine giant and lay down comfortably. His consciousness jumped into the dream bubble. As a thread fell when he regained his senses, he had already entered the Purple Vine Demon's body through his dream clone. The control of the dream clone was naturally far inferior to the parallel mind. However, if he did not engage in an intense battle, it was barely enough. Jiang Li often controlled the huge wooden puppet. Now, the 9 Nether Tree realm was easily controlled by vines. After adapting twice, he quickly could control it freely. Controlling this big guy, he no longer had to be careful. After crossing the stone wall, he walked towards the higher peak. This giant, formed from tens of thousands of vines, was already enough to fight with ordinary earth immortals. Moreover, he was one of the 8 demons, so his path could be said to be smooth. In the body of the vine giant, the fingers of the quietly sleeping Jiang Li gradually turned black from his fingertips. As he climbed higher and higher on the mountain, the black qi became stronger and stronger. After his fingers were completely dyed black, the black color that was filled with death qi turned into 10 black lines that continued to spread upwards. Following his palm, wrist, arm, and chest, when the 10 black lines gathered at his heart, Jiang Li would be a dead person in the netherworld. Chapter 550, Heaven Scolding Opera 1. Have you heard? Granny Nether Mountain is finally going to attack those 4 hands. We captured more than 500 children this time. Perhaps we can get a share. The evil spirits in a mountain range were rushing on the rugged mountain path. They were all there to participate in the flesh and blood banquet. Even if they could not eat meat without an invitation, it was good to heat it up at the side and drink a bowl of soup after dinner. Those delicate top-grade foods are all eaten by the experts who received the invitation. We don't have to think about it. However, I won't come for nothing this time. I heard that there's still a chance later. Oh, what do you mean? Tell me quickly. A 100-eyed house centipede pretended to be reserved and smiled. As expected, the surrounding small demons immediately asked. Clearly, they were all craving human blood. Those 4 hands didn't follow the rules and actually dared to fool the granny. In any case, they only have so few people left. In the past few decades, the food supply has been decreasing. She's long lost her patience with them. After this full moon night, she'll prepare to kill all of them. At that time, as long as we join the hunting team, we can also have a taste of fresh human flesh. Is that true? Although it's not as delicious as children, I haven't smelled blood for decades. The few evil spirits chatted. The delicious food and smelly saliva were dragged to the ground. Hey, what are these? At this moment, an evil spirit suddenly fell to the ground. Its feet seemed to be entangled by something. Looking down, it turned out that small vines were wrapped around his ankle. He was about to untie the vines and continue on his way when he suddenly felt a sharp pain. It was as if 1,000 mouths were biting his legs. This was not the end. To his horror, he discovered that the surrounding ground was densely covered in purple vines. Before he could cry out, a large number of purple vines surged up and enveloped his entire body. The vines entered his mouth, nose, and ears, causing him to directly lose all ability to resist. Beside him, the few evil spirits that were walking with him were in the same situation. They could cause trouble in the outside world, but under these vines, they were even more helpless than lambs. The little demons and ghosts did not even have the chance to scream before they were wrapped in purple vines and dragged to the side. In the end, they were pulled into the body of a vine giant. Jiang Li opened one eye and sent a portion of his mind into the coffin space while half asleep. The purple vine rock he controlled was not slow. Moreover, it could be considered a famous demon in the Baekyin Mountain. Along the way, only he looked for trouble with others. No one else looked for trouble with him, saving him a lot of effort in hiding. It was almost a straight path. After crossing more than 10 mountains in a row, it did not take much effort to reach the Yin Mountain where Granny Nether Mountain was. In fact, he had already arrived here a few hours ago and had already entered the mountain to see the target of this trip, the 4 hands children who had been captured. However, after circling around inside, he did not do anything and retreated. This was because those children were not locked in any hidden dungeons. There was not even a cloth on the cage. Just like that, they were hung in the air. Tens of thousands of demons and ghosts squeezed under the iron cage. They looked up and stared at the children, desperately breathing in their auras. Among them, there were even 3 of the 8 Nether Mountain demons. They were all terrifying monsters at the Demon King level. All of them had the power to destroy a low-grade Divine Judgment faction alone. This gave Jiang Li almost no chance to attack. Each of the 3 monsters could bring Jiang Li immense pressure. Under the premise that the other party did not have any special treasures or powerful divine powers, with Jiang Li's current strength, he felt that he could still deal with 1. If he encountered 2, he would have to escape. If he was surrounded by 3, his chance of escaping would become quite slim. Moreover, the legendary Granny Nether Mountain, a terrifying existence above the Demon King, was there. Once he did something suspicious, not to mention whether he could escape, as long as a battle occurred and a slight commotion attracted that person, Jiang Li would really be unlucky. He could only walk around and run out in the name of preparing gifts. Of course, he did not give up. However, he still needed to make some preparations for such a dangerous thing. Jiang Li found a mountain path that led to the flesh and blood banquet, and stopped them before starting to wantonly capture these spirits and ghosts in the back Yin Mountain. In any case, there were no laws on this mountain. The rules set by that granny were quite lax. As long as one was strong enough, burning, killing, and plundering were all free. No one cared. On the contrary, if he killed his way to fame, he would gain even more respect. Due to the attraction of the flesh and blood banquet, more demons and ghosts rushed over from all directions. The efficiency of guarding this path was really abnormally high. Not long after, more than 1,000 rare species appeared in the coffin. After putting away the few evil spirits, 4 streaks of light flew over from afar and transformed into 4 beautiful figures beside him. Chapter 551, Heaven Scolding Opera 2. Young master, I've completed your instructions. All right, then it's time for us to attend the banquet. A crack appeared on the vine giant's body, and the 4 girls were recalled. Then he retracted the vines that spread nearby and took huge steps towards Granny Nether Mountain's residence. On both sides of the road, green-black ghost flames floated. Ahead, one could see an ancient graveyard. This graveyard had clearly been neglected for many years. Green stone tombstones were crookedly inserted into the ground. Thick black moss covered them, making the blurry words on them even more difficult to see. The vine giant stepped over, and the ground immediately crackled, producing sounds like beans being fried. A large number of ancient skeletons were broken by his foot. After he left, on the ground that still had huge footprints, a tattered bone hand peeled off the black soil that was filled with yin qi and crawled out. The bone hand picked around and quickly used some relatively intact bones to put itself together. Then he moved his long and short bone legs and pulled out his tombstone from the ground with the other bone demons, piecing together stone tables in the graveyard. This was the table used for this flesh and blood banquet. Jiang Li did not feel that it was taboo. He controlled the vine giant to gradually contract, and his footsteps became smaller and smaller. Soon, the tall purple giant of the small mountain turned into a vine humanoid that was only 10 feet tall. He weaved a vine chair for himself and sat down at the largest stone table in the center of the graveyard. There was originally a 2-headed centipede demon here, and its 2 heads were gambling with each other. In the end, it was carried out by Jiang Li and thrown to the side after forming a ball while he occupied this good seat. Before the flesh banquet began, a huge pot was already set up in the center of the graveyard. White ghost flames rose from the pot, burning the thick soup inside and steaming. A few monsters with festering skin and unrecognizable original appearances were throwing some strange things into the soup. It made the pot emit a strange smell. However, with their tattered hands, Jiang Li felt that it was impossible for them to guarantee food hygiene. Beside the huge pot was a large steamer with 9 levels. Each level could fit 20 children. Not only did they have to eat this banquet, but they also had to eat in a ritualistic manner. They cooked and steamed at the same time. Of the more than 504 hands children hanging from the iron cage, half of them had already been hung on the iron pot. The other half was grabbed by a few bone demons and placed into the steamer. Jiang Li took a deep breath and did not let his anger towards these demons and ghosts get to his head. If he wanted to save these children, he had to find a suitable opportunity. Or rather, he had to create a suitable opportunity. Not far away, a fragrance of wine came. A few demons dug open a huge tomb and carried out jars of aged wine. Who knew which genius would come up with such a creative idea to brew wine in a graveyard? The seal on the wine jar was opened, and the fragrance of pure black yin wine floated for 100 miles. Jiang Li smelled a familiar smell. The work of the four maids was done very well. A portion of these ancient tomb wines had already been mixed with soul dissolution liquor. Jiang Li wanted to use the same trick again and get a group of guys drunk first. "Shipan, you're actually hiding here. What, you're not dead yet?" Jiang Li was observing the situation of those children when a mountain-like stone demon walked over with an earthquake. When this big guy saw the purple vine demon, two intense rays of hatred erupted from its black crystal eyes. He clearly did it on purpose. He stepped on the vines that spread out from the feet of the purple vine demon. The huge weight broke the tough vines. The hatred between the two sides had accumulated over hundreds of years of fighting. Even under the nose of Granny Nether Mountain, the two sides would immediately fight when they met. The shrunken purple vine demon seemed to be much weaker. Jiang Li raised his head and noticed that there was an ancient well behind this stone giant. He could clearly sense that the ancient well was emitting a moonlight aura. "Is that the moon well? You're really lucky to be able to get such a thing." Jiang Li was naturally not someone who would not retaliate after being beaten. The purple vine demon sat on the spot and did not move. A large number of vines suddenly broke out of the ground and wrapped around the stone giant's feet from below. Powerful roots squeezed through any gap on the rock giant's surface. There was even a need to expand and grow in the gap. Rocks were peeled off the legs of the stone demon giant. The rocks fell to the ground, creating huge pits one after another, causing the originally passable graveyard to become even more chaotic. This rock demon, one of the 8 Nether Mountain demons, was actually stronger than the fused purple vine demon. However, he was the incarnation of a mountain rock and was naturally countered by the vine demon. The two sides had fought many times over the hundreds of years without a true outcome. Just as the conflict between the two sides was about to worsen, a gentle and plaintive song sounded from all directions. "There's no reason to violate the law of death, you'll be punished. If you're not careful, your cries will shake the heavens and earth, in an instant. The wandering souls will head to the hall first, Why don't you bury the world with resentment, The originally noisy demons and ghosts immediately fell silent. They stood on the spot obediently and listened, looking for the direction of the opera. Even the rock demon and the purple vine demon, controlled by Jiang Li, glared at each other before retracting their methods. This was because there was only one lord on this back yin mountain who liked to listen to operas. Along with this kind of song, it was often that Granny Nether Mountain whose might enveloped the entire back yin mountain range. At this moment, a gust of cold wind blew over. The ghost flames in the graveyard suddenly swayed, and the light and shadow under the flames of the demons distorted. The tone of the opera became even more sorrowful and clear, as if that person was beside them. "There is the sun and moon, there are ghosts and gods controlling life and death, O heaven and earth. It's just enough to distinguish between pure and turbid, but how can it be compared to a thief, Those who are good, suffer poverty, and have shorter lives, Those who commit evil, enjoy wealth and longevity, O heaven and earth. You're afraid of bullying the weak, so you're also pushing the boat along with the flow. Earth, if you don't differentiate between good and bad, what's the point? Heaven, you're wrong and foolish. Sigh, you only shed 2 tears. Jiang Li's scalp went numb when he heard this joke. He looked up and could vaguely see lightning rolling in the distant void. The lyrics were actually scolding heaven and earth. If it was in the outside world, Jiang Li would definitely stay away immediately. If he continued to curse like this, he would definitely be struck by lightning. In this place of darkness, the netherworld fragments seemed to be far away and could not strike here for the time being. After the performance ended, there was an urgent cry that tore through the eardrums. Jiang Li rubbed his itchy ears, and then he looked at the ground in front of him. Something was about to come out. First, a few rocks rolled, and then the ground in front of him split open. A stage rose from under the ground of the graveyard. The stage was huge. The roof on all four sides was covered in thick black paint. There were 3 layers of black and red curtains hanging on both sides of the stage. It looked old, but it was sufficiently imposing. Figures flashed on the stage. More than 10 ghosts with heavy makeup were working hard to put on a show regarding the Yamanite judgment and Ghost Mother's reincarnation. On both sides of the stage, there were a few spider demons moving their 8 limbs at the same time. They were beating gongs and drums in a rhythm, making the atmosphere very good. As he looked at the few figures flying on the stage, the seriousness in Jiang Li's eyes grew. In his vision, those ghosts were all ghosts with extremely heavy resentment, bad luck, and yin qi. They were even worse than the few ghost kings he had subdued. This was especially true for the fellow who was acting as the tragic ghost mother. Jiang Li actually could not see through the other party at all. At this moment, the ghost show on the stage finally ended. The innocent mother was forced to separate from her child, and the child was thrown into tragic Death City. He had to accompany loneliness and hunger for 100 years. As for the mother, she was thrown into the cycle and reincarnated into cows, sheep, chickens, and ducks, experiencing the pain of constantly parting with her child. The curtain pulled down, and then a ghost in a white robe and a tall hat crawled out and shouted, "Granny is here." Chapter 552, Preconception 1. As he shouted, "Granny is here," the thick stage curtain was pulled open again, and the scene of the Yamanite judgment had already disappeared. What replaced it was a simple black background. A woman with a red birthmark, the size of a palm, was lying on a rocking chair, swaying slightly in the middle of the stage. The group of ghosts that were about to sing had already returned to their original state. They stood beside the woman and held incense burners filled with black incense sticks. Thick smoke spread out, making the woman in the middle look even more mysterious. When the people below saw this, they hurriedly kowtowed and shouted, "Welcome, Granny. Granny Nether Mountain will enjoy eternal happiness and live as long as the heavens." As it turned out, the more it was in the netherworld, the more it yearned for the words of the immortals in the 9 heavens. In the continent of the 9 provinces, only those martial artists who had never seen the world would always say such words. In the cultivation world, no one had said anything like this for a long time. Jiang Li was among them, and he could only sigh at the inferior cultural standards of this group of demons. After shouting the slogan, he raised his head and sized up that person. That Granny Nether Mountain did not look old, but her body gave people a feeling of vicissitude. Moreover, Jiang Li had a strange feeling when he looked at her. Granny Nether Mountain raised her hand and beckoned. A cold wind carried a 4-hands child over, and she gently hugged him. Looking at the 4-hands child, the woman's eyes seemed to reveal some motherly light. Her palm gently rubbed the space between the child's brows, scattering the accumulated yin qi inside. This made the child's expression visibly better. Granny Nether Mountain's actions and expression made her look like a mother. However, when he saw her actions, Jiang Li's pupils slowly constricted. Jiang Li felt the smell of the 9 nether spiritual qi from the cold wind and the power of the woman's fingertips. The 4-hands child, who had not eaten anything for several days and was exhausted, slowly woke up. However, after the child woke up and was confused for a few breaths, he opened his eyes and saw the face in front of him that was mostly covered in a red birthmark. Granny Nether Mountain smiled at the child, revealing a mouthful of black and yellow teeth. The child had never seen this before and cried in fear. The cries were ear-piercing and could not be stopped. As if stimulated by the resisting cry, the motherly light in Granny Nether Mountain's eyes quickly extinguished like a candle in the wind, replaced by disgust. This child is really ugly. The palm that was originally stroking gently suddenly grabbed the child's neck. Bit by bit, it exerted strength, and the crying stopped. It was not until the child's face became redder and darker that Granny Nether Mountain seemed to have lost interest and casually threw him to the side. A ghost beside him grabbed the child and stirred him twice. Realizing that he was not completely dead, it carried him and stuffed him back into the steamer. Because the four hands had two heads, the other could still breathe, so it was not so easy to die. This was a blessing in disguise. Granny has given us blood and flesh. All the demons will now offer their gifts. At this moment, the white figure at the beginning shouted again. The demons below immediately understood and carried the things they had prepared in front of them. There was no need to mention those small demons that he could not name. What they could take out could only be considered trash. Only when hundreds of reputable demons stood in front could the things they took out barely enter Granny Nether Mountain's eyes. Green Capital Ghost King sends 12 heart-refining ghost beads. Eight-legged Demon King sends a traceless yin thread. Thousand-eyed Demon King sends a pair of flying tiger leopard golden goo. Poison Heart Corpse King sends the 5 flavors poison earth over. One powerful monster after another walked closer. One after another, natural treasures unique to the netherworld were sent to the stage and placed in front of Granny Nether Mountain. All kinds of precious items were usually only seen in the words of ancient books. Now that they were finally seen, they were wasted in the hands of these unintelligent demons. However, he finally knew why Granny Nether Mountain liked to treat people to a meal so much. Every time there was a banquet, she would receive these good things. If it was Jiang Li, he would definitely hold one every now and then. However, when he looked at the sinister natural treasures, his heart ached. When these demons and ghosts plucked these genius places, their methods were too rough, and the way they were stored was speechless. After they ruined the effects of those treasures, it was already fortunate that there was only 60–70% left. However, in comparison, the thing they took out was still slightly better than the 500-year-old ginseng that Pan had originally prepared. This vine that only knew how to sunbathe was really too poor. Next is the Barbarian Stone Demon King. Soon it was the Stone Giant's turn. The Barbarian Stone Demon King still carried the ancient well forward. Then, the rocks on its body wriggled strangely and moved along the arm with the ancient well, finally landing on the ground. The ancient well landed on the ground as if it had originally been there. The nearby demons approached and saw that there was still nearly 30 feet of depth in the well. Under the reflection of the moonlight, the well water inside emitted a mercury-like luster. Chapter 553, Preconception 2. The Barbarian Stone Demon King sends a moonlight well. This moonlight well was indeed different. Granny Nether Mountain, who had been lying on the rocking chair and not expressing anything, was also attracted by this well. She got up and took a look. Evil spirits like them had always absorbed the power of the moon to cultivate. With the help of this moonlight well, the speed at which she absorbed the moon yin could at least increase by 10 times. No matter who held it, it was a rare treasure. Granny will reward you. The Barbarian Stone Demon King will go up 30 steps and drink with her. The white ghost shadow shouted again. The Barbarian Stone Demon King was overjoyed. He tried his best to shrink his body and climbed onto the stage to sit at a table beside the Granny. On it was a small cup containing a muddy yellow spring water. This cup of spring water looked like it was casually picked up from the roadside. However, the dignified Demon King looked at the cup of spring water excitedly. This was the water of the yellow spring. "Thank you for your wine, Granny." As the Barbarian Stone Demon King thanked her, it did not forget to sneer and glance in Jiang Li's direction. After drinking the yellow spring water, he could reconstruct his demon body and completely escape the restraint of the purple vine demon. Jiang Li did not know what grudges these two fellows had previously. However, this stone demon was clearly impatient to end this 100-year-old feud. Just as he raised his hand to send the yellow spring water into his mouth, several stone cracks on the Barbarian Stone Demon King's body suddenly exploded. More than 100 ghosts darted out from inside. A layer of pale white flames suddenly ignited on their bodies, and they pounced on Granny Nether Mountain, who was sitting not far away from them. The flames on those ghosts were called the Ghost Lantern Cold Flame. In this place surrounded by demons, the risk of Jiang Li taking action himself was too great, so he naturally had to make some other preparations. Previously, when the stone demon came to him, Jiang Li had done something to it. While using the roots to open the stone crack, he stuffed something in. "How dare you!" Seeing this abnormality, the demons and ghosts attacked one after another, directly blowing up many ghost soldiers in the air. However, this stage was only so big. The barbarian stone demon king, who was praised for being able to get close, could be said to be very close to Granny Nether Mountain. Nearly half of the ghost soldiers had already approached Granny Nether Mountain. They reached out and wanted to touch the other party with the Ghost Lantern Cold Flame. Jiang Li's eyes that were hidden under the vines stared fixedly at the stage. Although there was still a thin layer of energy membrane protecting her entire body, the membrane of light that looked as fragile as a soap bubble was enough to make the methods of an Earth-immortal expert fail. However, Jiang Li was filled with confidence in the white flames that had no temperature. Facing this kind of flame that countered nature, even that granny who was above the Demon King would not be so easy to deal with. As expected, the moment the cold flames on the ghost soldier were tainted by the membrane of light, the white flames suddenly increased by 100 times. Flames instantly covered the entire stage. Most of the stage was filled with ghosts. After being ignited, they immediately felt the pain of their souls being burned. They howled and fled the area of the stage, rolling around in the black soil of the graveyard outside. However, although they looked miserable, they were actually not so easily burned to death. Although ghosts were also countered by the Ghost Lantern Cold Flame, they were far from being suppressed like the 9 Nether would. Without outsiders causing trouble, he could still use some other energy to strip away the cold flames. However, now that the demons were surrounding him, Jiang Li naturally could not attack while they were down. His eyes were still staring fixedly at the figure sitting in the middle of the stage, enveloped in flames. These ghosts were not his main goal. As long as he could deal with that Granny Nether Mountain, the Bakyin Mountain would instantly fall into chaos. At that time, Jiang Li could completely destroy them one by one and slowly deal with the other monsters. However, unlike what he had imagined, Granny Nether Mountain was still sitting there. It was as if even her expression and movements did not change much from before. The white flames that entangled and bit her body did not seem to hurt her at all. How is this possible? She had clearly used the 9 Nether spiritual chi just now. Jiang Li was certain that he had seen it clearly. Although it was mixed with ghost chi and yin chi, he could not be wrong about the 9 Nether spiritual chi inside. The purity and quality of the spiritual chi surpassed his own. The explosive flames just now also proved this point. However, why was she, this Granny Nether Mountain, indifferent to the burning of the Ghost Lantern Cold Flame? There's no temperature, only flames that burn the soul. Interesting. In the next moment, Jiang Li watched helplessly as the other party dispersed the 9 Nether spiritual chi in her body and replaced it with the power of a vicious ghost. Without the 9 Nether spiritual chi as fuel, the pale flames weakened. Then it was forcefully gathered by the power of the evil ghost. The surging flames were compressed by the pitch-black energy bit by bit, turning into a crystal that froze the flames inside. Oh no, he had made a mistake due to preconception. This guy's main body was definitely not the 9 Nether wood. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to do this. Since this Granny Nether Mountain was not that broken root, what was she? What did she have to do with that root? Jiang Li took a deep breath, and his eyes focused as he controlled the purple vine demon to attack brazenly. However, his target was not Granny Nether Mountain, but the confused barbarian stone demon king standing not far away. Barbarian stone demon king, how dare you attack me, die? With Jiang Li inside as a spiritual chi battery, he provided an endless stream of top-grade spiritual chi, allowing the purple vine demon's strength to rise to a higher level. Powerful attacks at the demon king level could also be easily used. Vines that were comparable to profound rank artifacts bound the rock giant tightly. The teeth under the vines began to bite the hard rocks, desperately trying to make some cracks appear on the rock's surface. Then, tiny roots took advantage of the gap and continuously squeezed into the cracks, causing them to split open layer by layer. If Jiang Li used the power of the 9 Nether Usura to amplify the purple vine demon, he could still allow it to unleash stronger strength. However, those would undoubtedly be discovered by others. However, this was enough. With the purple vine demon under Jiang Li's control leading the way, the surrounding powerful demons finally reacted. Since the ghosts burning with flames came from the barbarian stone demon king, he was clearly the culprit. Just now, he had even taken the initiative to offer something as good as the moonlight well. There was indeed a conspiracy here. Who would they beat up if not him? Jiang Li's vines had long sealed every hole in his body, causing this stone demon to have no chance to defend itself. The other 7 of the 8 Nether Mountain demons attacked together and quickly beat the stone demon until it could not take care of itself. The 36 nails were nailed into his body. The dignified demon king lay on the ground like a dead dog, no longer able to resist. In the stands, Granny Nether Mountain was still sitting on the chair. Her posture had not even changed. However, Jiang Li seemed to have noticed that the birthmark that covered half of the other party's face seemed to have changed a little. Jiang Li carefully compared it to the scene in his memory. The birthmark seemed to have faded a little and become smaller. Granny Nether Mountain seemed to have sensed her change. She touched the birthmark on her face and observed the flames frozen in the crystal with interest. Those flames were not burning freely. As long as Jiang Li was willing, he could control them to be forcefully extinguished. However, that might allow her to capture his mental fluctuations. He had seen the outcome of the barbarian stone demon king just now, and Jiang Li did not want to be the second. Jiang Li stood on the spot and thought for a moment before putting away the gift he had prepared. It was a tree that could continuously grow human flesh. It was one of Galanfran's works. Jiang Li seemed to have suddenly recalled something and temporarily replaced the gift with a long white wooden board. It was a death token from Tragic Death City. Chapter 554, Well Done 1. This Granny Nether Mountain was actually not formed from the root of the 9 Nether wood. Her main body was most likely an old ghost. The sudden discovery disrupted Jiang Li's original plan. Originally, the ghost lantern cold flame that he had high hopes for only caused a small commotion at this moment. It did not even hurt a single hair on the other party. However, this situation was actually not difficult to understand. In fact, it should be said that this was much more reasonable. If the broken root that the back yin earth spirit mentioned was really from the 9 Netherwood source branch, it was actually even more impossible for it to develop intelligence. This was because the will of the spiritual root, the 9 Nether wood, had been erased by an ancient mighty figure. After so many years, even the main body could not develop intelligence again and could only survive on instinct. Moreover, it was the last root in the back yin mountain. At the same time, it was not only the 9 Nether wood that could control the 9 Nether spiritual chi. Jiang Li himself was a living example. When he did not use the 9 Nether spiritual chi, the ghost lantern cold flame was also useless. He even relied on the blood tattoo of the ghost lantern fish to control this talent spiritual fire. It could be seen that the other party had probably obtained a portion of the power of the 9 Nether wood by chance. He shook his head helplessly. Since he could not rely on his fatal weakness to directly deal with Granny Nether Mountain, Jiang Li could no longer attack openly. That was no different from courting death. At this moment, he recalled the scene when Granny Nether Mountain appeared. One had to know that this Granny's hobby was not listening to opera, but singing. At that time, this Granny Nether Mountain was not watching from the side. Instead, she acted as a flower and personally acted as the tragic female ghost who had been sentenced to the path of reincarnation. The redness on her face that could not even cover the stage colors made it easy for her to be recognized. Coupled with her performance towards the four hands child at the beginning, Jiang Li felt that this Granny Nether Mountain, who was most likely a powerful ghost, might have an obsession with children. Unlike humans who could let go of their desires, ghosts were condensed from their obsessions. If they completely saw through all their obsessions, this ghost would probably dissipate. Therefore, regardless of whether they were powerful or not, ghosts were basically paranoid. After asking around in private, Jiang Li discovered that the probability of that scene of throwing a child into the cycle of reincarnation was very high on Granny Nether Mountain stage. That scene should have happened in ancient times, when the reincarnation cycle still existed. None of the characters inside had a chance of surviving until now. However, similar stories were indeed possible again. Moreover, Granny Nether Mountain seemed to have been using her strength to find the whereabouts of Tragic Death City. However, because the Netherworld was still in a fragmented state, it was impossible for her subordinates to find it no matter how they searched. However, while others could not find it, Jiang Li, who held the key clues, might really be able to find it. It was only a death token of the Tragic Death City. Now, Jiang Li's Fengdu City had the reincarnation of K Siddhagarbha, Q Shui. He had tried it before. He could already create a large number of death tokens himself. After casually cutting a piece of wood and writing down the key information, he could be guided by Tragic Death City. Jiang Li still had a custom-made token in his hand. Even if he gave away this death token that he had seized from Tragic Death City, he would not lose anything. Soon, because the barbarian Stone Demon King suddenly attacked, the commotion returned to normal. Apart from the unlucky guy lying on the ground after being pierced by the morning nails, this was just a small episode for the others. The flames, without any temperature, did not even cause any damage to the stage. After casually cleaning up the battlefield, it was the purple vine demon Shipan's turn to give his gift. A long white wooden board was squeezed out from the gap between the vines. He held it in a pair of vine hands and handed it to the white ghost that had already extinguished the cold flames on its body. "Lord Shipan, this is." The white ghost shadow was stunned and asked for the first time. The knowledgeable white ghost did not recognize the wooden board. In his eyes, although this wooden board had a slight yin-qi fluctuation, its strength was not even comparable to casually breaking a branch on this back yin mountain. There were no runes carved on the surface. However, there seemed to be some words written on it before it was erased. However, he did not believe that anyone would dare to patronize Granny Nether Mountain like this. He only thought that he was blind and asked Jiang Li. He did not hide it and explained. "This thing is called the Death Token. It's used by the souls of the dead in the Netherworld. As long as you write your name on the wooden tablet, you can guide the ghosts who have yet to die and head to Tragic Death City." Jiang Li had just finished speaking when he saw a cold wind sweep past. Granny Nether Mountain, who had been sitting on the rocking chair since she appeared, suddenly appeared before him. "What you said, is it true?" This powerful ruler of the Back Yin Mountain was so fast that even the current Jiang Li could not react. She grabbed the wooden sign and asked Jiang Li excitedly. This granny was not good-looking, and her voice was very unpleasant. When the hoarse throat spoke, it was as if it was using 2 millstones to grind an iron nail. There were also hundreds of different voices mixed in. It was as messy as the 1,000 faces of the divine statue clone. Chapter 555, Well Done Too. If not for the fact that Jiang Li cultivated the Bodhisattva Heart Sutra, he might not have understood what she said. "This is absolutely true. I don't dare to lie at all." Granny Nether Mountain stared at the vine figure in front of her, as if she wanted to see through it. However, the slowly wriggling vine did not have eyes. The wisp of flames covered Jiang Li inside very well. Granny Nether Mountain looked for a long time, but could not tell if Jiang Li was lying. Then she began to use her sharp and black nails to scratch the wooden board. She scraped off a pinch of powder from it and rubbed it carefully in her hand. Inside, there was indeed an aura that she had never seen before. At the very least, it proved that this wooden board did not come from this netherworld fragment. This made her believe it even more. At this moment, Granny Nether Mountain formed a strange seal in her hand and stabbed it into the ground. Immediately, the ground shook again. Something was crawling out from the depths of the mountain range. In the end, what broke out of the ground was not a huge thing, but 2 roots. The patterns on the surface of the roots looked like fossils, and they revealed the smell of age. However, it was precisely the layer of fossil-like skin that sealed off the aura inside, causing Jiang Li to be unable to clearly sense it. The roots reached out of the ground, and one of them wrapped around a child in the steamer. On the other side, Granny Nether Mountain casually grabbed a ghost from below and wrapped it around another root. As the 2 roots wrapped around each other, a strange thing was pulled out of the 4-hands child's body and poured into the ghost along the roots. Although that thing could not be seen or touched, Jiang Li knew what was happening in front of him. The thing that was extracted from the child and poured into the ghost's body was lifespan, or rather, Yang lifespan. A long time ago, in Qin Shuman's ghost market, there were many peddlers who often tricked travelers who passed by and used their Yang lifespan to trade with them. Of course, the methods of ordinary ghosts could only strip away the Yang lifespan of ordinary mortals. Moreover, the methods were very crude. Sometimes, after only taking away a few years or even a few months of lifespan, mortals would die of illness after returning home. Later on, Jiang Li obtained the broken bowl of the beggar ghost king in Fengdu City. That thing could extract the lifespan of cultivators below the earth immortal realm and turn them into copper coins. Jiang Li even used this to open a rather lively casino. Therefore, Jiang Li did not find it strange when he saw this method of extracting lifespan. However, the efficiency of converting lifespan seemed to be shockingly high. It was far greater than the broken bowl in Jiang Li's Fengdu City, and it was even more powerful than his 2 netherwood clones. Although it did not emit any aura or spiritual qi, Jiang Li was 90% sure that this was the root of the 9 netherwood. Therefore, Granny Nether Mountain had used some unknown method to awaken and control this root. Through this, she had grasped the 9 nether spiritual qi and her current strength. As his lifespan was continuously extracted, some wrinkles gradually appeared on the child's face, and his skin and muscles became relaxed and weak. There was no change in the ghost. Yang lifespan was considered precious. However, if it was used on ghosts without special methods, it was actually very difficult to unleash its true effect. In ancient times, unspent lifespan would still hinder reincarnation. However, Granny Nether Mountain did not care about this. She grabbed the ghost that had been injected with decades of lifespan and stuffed the powder of the death token in her hand into its body. Then she grabbed the ghost with both hands and rubbed it repeatedly. She crushed this unlucky guy into ashes on the spot and threw him into the air. Ghost powder scattered everywhere. As the soul fragments scattered, they emitted specks of fluorescent light. In it, an illusory city appeared. It's true, it's really tragic Death City. The excitement on Granny Nether Mountain's face was obvious. She reached out to grab the illusion. However, it was only an illusion after all. When she grabbed it, it stirred into chaos and disappeared. After verifying the authenticity of the death token, Granny Nether Mountain looked at the wooden board in her hand as if it was a treasure. Some things did not have to be made of precious materials. This was especially true for official documents. Even if it was just a few black words on a piece of white paper, it might surpass priceless treasures. Good, good, good. Purple Vine Rock, you did well. Granny Nether Mountain, who had recovered from her shock, looked at the purple vine demon that was controlled by Jiang Li, her eyes filled with admiration. She took out a small basin from somewhere and placed it beside the 2 roots. A few breaths later, 2 turbid yellow streams flowed out from the 2 roots. After filling a basin, she handed it to Jiang Li. It was an entire basin of yellow spring water. When Jiang Li had just attacked the barbarian stone demon king, he had secretly put away the cup of yellow spring water that the other party had yet to drink. He had been smug just now, but now he felt that his poverty was being looked down on. Moreover, the other party was using what Jiang Li had been looking for to look down on him. The shrouded 9 heavens in the sky showed no moon, and the 9 nether beneath had the yellow spring water. Extracting the yellow spring water from the 9 nether was simply the ability of the 9 nether broken root. Jiang Li was determined to obtain everything related to the 9 nether wood. Now, the root of the ancient Khanate spiritual root was controlled by others, which really made him a little unhappy. However, on the surface, Jiang Li naturally could not show it. He had to thank Granny Nether Mountain. Jiang Li was carefully putting away the yellow spring water. Granny Nether Mountain spoke to the evil spirits below. This full moon banquet is cancelled. Purple Vine Shipan, you can take away 10 of them. This person did not care about the mood of the demons and ghosts on the back Yin Mountain. Because she still needed the lifespan of these children, she directly cancelled this banquet. Although she had already received the gift, so what? However, Jiang Li, who had offered the death token, still had a special treatment. He was allowed to take away 10. Thank you, Granny. After Jiang Li thanked her reluctantly, he thought for a moment and continued. Granny left these children behind for their lifespan, right? These children can't live on Yin Mountain for long. It's even more inconvenient to bring them across the mountain. I have a method to convert lifespan into copper coins. Granny, please take a look. Jiang Li walked to the side of the iron cage and stretched out his vines to grab 10 children. The vines on his body wriggled and swallowed the 10 children from every corner of their bodies. In fact, he only sent these children into the coffin space. Another wave of vines rubbed against each other. A moment later, dozens of lifespan copper coins appeared in Jiang Li's hand. The quality of this lifespan copper coin was naturally far inferior to the quality of lifespan absorbed by the 9 nether wood. However, to Granny Nether Mountain, the quality of the lifespan was not important at all. As long as she could regain Yang lifespan and return to Tragic Death City, it was enough. It was naturally best if Jiang Li could turn the lifespan into copper coins for convenient storage. She immediately waved her hand and threw the remaining children to Jiang Li. The purple vine demon transformed into a vine giant again. Under the envious gazes of the other demons, it put away all 500 children. More than 2,000 lifespan copper coins fell from his hand. These lifespan copper coins were all obtained from Fengdu City's casino some time ago. It was fine if one used this kind of low-quality lifespan for the first time, but the more he used it, the worse the effect would be. If he used it for a long time, it might even cause a hole in his life and cause his lifespan to flow away for no reason. Jiang Li looked down on such things, but he still brought quite a few with him. This was a good time to put on an act. He heaved a sigh of relief. His goal of saving these children had finally been achieved. He would find an opportunity to secretly send them away. Next, he would cross the back Yin Mountain and become a dead person. With this Granny Nether Mountain leading the way, he might be able to make a trip to Tragic Death City. Chapter 556, Monk Q Shui 1. The next day, a large ball of black qi wrapped in a cold wind rushed down the mountain. In the black qi, there were mayflies on the shore, mountain demons at the bottom of the mountain, ghosts in the cave, and evil souls at the bottom of the stream. The monsters hiding on the Yin Mountain surged out at this moment, when they were summoned by that granny. In fact, the ghosts and monsters that lived on the Yin Mountain all year round had adapted to the reversal of everything on the Yin Mountain. Instead, they could not adapt to the normal rules of heaven and earth. Most of the natives of the back Yin Mountain would be unable to move normally like ordinary people after leaving the region. Moreover, this phenomenon was even more inexplicable because the rules of heaven and earth were not ordinary human domains. It was impossible to break. This was also the main reason why those four hands lived near the Baekyin mountain all year round, and were not eaten by the greedy demons. However, this time, the situation was clearly different. Before they set off, Granny Nether Mountain scattered a green light at them, temporarily maintaining the effect of the Baekyin Mountain's inverted domain on them. As long as they did not leave the Baekyin Mountain too far, the reversal power would not disappear. They could move freely in the outside world like they were on the mountain. After rushing out of the Baekyin Mountain, all the ghosts and monsters rushed excitedly to the Four Hands village. This time, they had to work, and the benefits were huge. Although they were tasked to capture those four hands alive and could not kill, the vitality of the four hands was tenacious. As long as they stopped the bleeding properly and ate the hands, or even one of the heads, they would not die. In the previous full moon banquet, they were already craving for it, but they did not even get a mouthful of soup. They were already about to go crazy. Now that there was a chance, it was naturally a chaotic situation. If they really rushed into the village, after a storm of blood, what was left would only be a pile of people begging to die. Delicious Four Hands, quickly contribute your flesh and blood. I want to eat your fingers one by one. Eyes, I love the smell of your eyes exploding in my mouth. The black clouds formed by demons and ghosts covered the sky and pressed down on the first village. Before they arrived, the cold wind that was stirred up had already blown away the roof like a hurricane, blowing down the house. The ghosts and demons rushed in excitedly, but after searching left and right, they did not find even a single person. This was simply an empty village. I smell people, they're walking that way. The other demons looked in the direction of the sound. Sure enough, there were panicked hand seals outside the village that spread in a distant direction. Wherever his footsteps passed, there were many miscellaneous items of the four hands. Clearly, everyone in this village had fled not long ago. Haha, they fled. Interesting, interesting. This is the feeling of hunting prey. How can a group of mortals escape from us? Little ones, do you know that the flesh that shakes in panic is the most delicious? If they are afraid to the extreme, the flesh will even twitch when it is swallowed. Seeing the four hands escape, the demons and ghosts did not panic at all. Instead, they laughed wildly. With the strength of mortals, where could they run to? Their noses could clearly smell the lingering human smell in the air. Under their pursuit, those humans could not escape no matter what. Following the smell of humans, the evil spirits transformed into a dark cloud and chased after the handprint. In just a moment, they arrived at the next village. They stirred up a cold wind and destroyed the village made of rocks again, leaving only the statue of Granny Nether Mountain built by the four hands. They did not dare to destroy that. They ran away too. What a group of stupid guys. If you don't eat more in the last few days and grow some fat, you'll lose the meat we want to eat if you run around outside. All the monsters did not suspect anything and continued to ride the surging black clouds towards the direction where the people were getting stronger and stronger. There were less than 10,000 people left, and there were only a dozen villages. After destroying all the villages, they could already hear the chaotic voices of the four hands fleeing. It was right ahead. The stench of sweat made these monsters drool. However, when they flew over, they did not see anyone. They saw a ghost door standing alone in an empty space. Around the door, there was a large number of footprints. Clearly, those four hands were still here. However, they did not see a single one, as if they had disappeared into thin air. At this moment, this door looked very suspicious. What is this? Those four hands are gone. If we can't bring them back, Granny Nether Mountain won't let us off. Someone must have captured them in advance. Should we go in and take a look? Look, someone's coming out. They're indeed inside. While a group of ghosts and demons were discussing in a disorderly manner around the gate of hell, a human suddenly appeared from the gate as if he had walked in the wrong direction. Seeing the black mass of demons and ghosts in the sky, his face turned pale and he crawled back. Haha, you still want to run? Those four hands are hiding inside. Let's rush in and eat them. after being seduced by the figure that ran out. How could these monsters with little brains remain calm? Chapter 557, Monk Qiu Shui 2. The most anxious group directly rushed in. Even if the remaining people were still a little suspicious, they panicked when they saw others running in front of them. Afraid that there would be nothing to eat if they ran late, they did not dare to fall behind and chased after the group into the gate of hell. After they entered, they disappeared from the netherworld fragment where the Back Yin Mountain was. Crossing the gate of hell to the other side, although it was still the netherworld, the environment had already changed drastically. As soon as they passed through the door, they saw a red sea of flowers and a golden grassland. The unique fragrance of flowers and grass made the monsters who had been in a crazy state feel calm for no reason. The rolling black clouds quietened down at this moment. How did you become like this? Wait, I've changed too. This face, is this my face? Yes, it's my face when I was alive. The demons and spirits on the Back Yin Mountain did not feel much about this. However, the most numerous and various strange ghosts changed one after another. From a pitch-black twisted shape, they gradually returned to their human forms and even slowly recovered their original appearance. The cold pain that was torturing them all the time seemed to have quieted down at this moment. The ghosts touched their chests. Although there was still no heartbeat inside, the spider lily sea and carefree grassland made them feel as if they had recovered their body temperature. Unlike the harsh environment of the Back Yin Mountain, this sea of flowers and grassland was simply a paradise in the netherworld to them. Bastard, what are you guys doing? Have you forgotten my orders? At this moment, a ghost king shook its head and woke up. It roared at the ghosts lying in the spider lily sea. Only then did those guys walk out reluctantly. Do you smell it? There's a lot of people ahead. Those 4 hands must be hiding in that city. What's more delicious than blood food? At this moment, the demons and ghosts also saw the huge city at the end of the road. They transformed into a black cloud again and flew over. However, compared to the previous madness, they were much quieter this time. After everyone left, the gate of hell behind them silently disappeared into the ground, cutting off their only escape route. Wu tilde wu tilde wu tilde wu tilde. Halfway through the small path in the city, 2 crows flew over from the city and circled above the monsters. However, the demons and ghosts ignored them. In the middle of the road in front of them sat a thin youth. Not long ago, the youth was still a pitiful person trapped in the dungeon. However, compared to his previous miserable appearance, at this moment, the youth's originally messy hair had already been shaved off, and his skin was clean. He had also changed into a plain white monk robe. Only the deformed and shrunken leg was still the same. It was unknown if he could not recover, or if he was unwilling to heal it. Haha, I finally found you. Kid, your clansmen abandoned you, right? Tell us quickly, where are the other 4 hands? If you're obedient, when we eat you, we can move faster and make you suffer less. Surrounded by so many human-eating monsters, the youth in the white monk robe was completely fearless. He had a faint smile on his face and did not mind these sinful fellows at all. Amitabha, suffering is boundless. Repent and gain salvation. Benefactors, you are trapped in the sea of bitterness. Since you have seen me today, it is your fate to be saved. I, Qiu Shui, am willing to save all of you from your suffering. Under the guidance of the divine statue clone, Qiu Shui had already stepped into the door of Buddhist cultivation. His comprehension and wisdom were so strong that it completely defeated the divine statue clone who had comprehended Ananda's blood tears. Unfortunately, Qiu Shui's kind words did not move these cruel demons. This group of monsters stayed in the Back Yin Mountain all year round. They did not know what monks were. They only felt that this kid was deliberately mystifying things. A ghost came up and wanted to bite off Qiu Shui's right hand. However, that bite directly shattered a few of its ghost teeth. This was not the end. Immediately after, a circle of Buddhist light appeared and turned the ghost into ashes on the spot. The other ghosts who wanted to rush up and snatch the food were also screaming in pain from the floating light, and hurriedly retreated. The benevolent travel temple's secret technique, palm meditation, was indeed very compatible with Qiu Shui. Once he used it, if he did not use those earth-rank artifacts, even Jiang Li would find it extremely difficult to injure him. Seeing that these demons were stubborn, Qiu Shui chanted the Buddhist scripture. Amitabha, Dana Paramita, Sila Paramita, Kasanti Paramita, Virya Paramita, Dhyana Paramita, Prajna Paramita. Mahasa void formless. Scripture and Sanskrit chanted from Qiu Shui's mouth. They immediately transformed into golden words that flew into the air and blossomed with brilliance. Behind the youth, the shadow of Bodhisattva that could no longer be seen was faintly discernible in the Buddhist light. The Vajra scripture broke through the momentum first. Under the illumination of these Buddhist lights, the cold wind and ghost chi that enveloped the front immediately melted like snow meeting spring. Chapter 558, Monk Qiu Shui 3. The monsters with terrifying and twisted faces began to roll around with their heads in their hands when they heard the Buddhist chants. Those voices brought them immense pain. A large number of monsters wanted to rush up and kill this culprit, but every time they approached, a Buddhist light would sweep past and turn them into ashes. The monsters' thoughts were very simple. If I can't beat you, I'll run all right. However, as the words void, formless sounded, all the demons suddenly discovered that they could no longer control their bodies. If they wanted to advance, they would retreat. If they wanted to fly, they would fall. Their bodies were completely different from their thoughts. After passing through the gate of hell, they were already too far away from the back Yin mountain. The reversal power in their bodies was quickly exhausted and could not be maintained for long. Now, with the stimulation of the targeted Buddhist voice, it completely dissipated. This was going to be fatal. The group of monsters from the back Yin mountain were trapped on the spot by the normal rules of heaven and earth. They could only roll around randomly. The Buddhist chanting of Qiu Shui continued. All the different types of sentient beings, whether they be born from eggs, born from a womb, born from moisture, or born spontaneously, whether or not they have form, whether they abide in perceptions or no perceptions, or without either perceptions or non-perceptions, I save them by causing them to enter nirvana without remainder. When these immeasurable, countless, infinite number of sentient beings have been liberated, in actuality, no sentient being has attained liberation. As he did so, a large amount of black chi emerged from these demons and ghosts, dispersed by the Buddhist light that filled the sky. The monsters that came this time were not at the Demon King level. Although there were many of them, with the power of Fengdu City, it was not a problem to eat them. However, even Jiang Li did not expect that this new hall master of the Northern Profound Hall would actually have such strength in a short period of time. In the distance, Jiang Li was watching all of this through the divine statue clone with a helpless expression. In order to eat this batch of monsters, he had gathered the 13 ghost kings, the Chang Lagardes, and dozens of demons from the 10 directions region. A large number of combat strength was waiting solemnly. However, they did not expect that the vanguard Qiu Shui had already stopped them all. Why else would he be called the reincarnation of an immortal or Buddha? Golden scales were not something that could be found in a pond. He could transform into a dragon when faced with a storm. The trials and difficulties faced by mortals could not stop him. If Jiang Li had not discovered the Qiu Shui by chance, according to the original trajectory, he should have stayed in the sewer forever, or even turned into a skeleton. However, even so, that kind of death was not the end. In the future, when the spiritual chi of heaven and earth recovered enough to support the existence of immortals and gods, there was a high chance that the dry bones of Qiu Shui could directly reconstruct his golden body, or even step over the threshold of immortality and surpass the mortal world. Perhaps it was not only him. In the continent of the 9 provinces, there might be other reincarnations of immortals and Buddhas quietly waiting for the opportunity to come. To these existences, the cultivation path generally recognized by the cultivation world might be dispensable. Those big shots liked to play. Generally, they would undergo tribulation and ascend. After becoming an immortal or Buddha, their cultivation would begin. The more Jiang Li knew about those ancient immortals and Buddhas, the more pressure he felt. Who knew how those immortals and Buddhas would treat the current cultivators when they revived? The spiritual chi of heaven and earth was recovering faster and faster. He had to obtain enough power to speak to those existences before that. What he did not know was that after the Four Hands group entered Fengdu City to settle down, another mysterious thread was pulled to him. Chapter 559, Crossing Life and Death 1. After the monsters of the Back Yin Mountain, who were not used to the rules of the outside world, had the reversal power in their bodies removed, their remaining combat strength was less than 1%. They became lambs waiting to be slaughtered outside Fengdu City. With the northern profound hall master Qiu Shui holding down the fort, and a large number of experts from Fengdu City coming out together, they took down all these monsters without any bloodshed. When the dust settled, all the demons and ghosts were put into the Fengdu dungeon. Jiang Li's main body, who was still on the Back Yin Mountain, opened his eyes. He heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, nothing happened. If not for the fact that he was staying in the enemy's headquarters to gather information, he would not have dared to open the gate of hell. If this granny nether mountain passed through the gate of hell and directly arrived at Fengdu City, Jiang Li's human emperor's inheritance might gain a different owner. Not long ago, after Granny Nether Mountain canceled the full moon banquet, she immediately issued an order to send out most of the ghosts controlled by her to capture those Four Hands. Needless to say, her goal was to hunt the Four Hands and store more Yang lifespan copper coins. She definitely wanted to bring her subordinates to attack Tragic Death City. However, now, her plan was probably going to fail. Forget about capturing all the Four Hands. The monsters of the Back Yin Mountain that she had sent out had all been captured on the other side of the gate. Unless Granny Nether Mountain could directly cross the Netherworld void and find the Netherworld fragment of Fengdu City 44,444 kilometers away. Otherwise, it would take a long time for the Back Yin Mountain to recover to its original state. Long ago, when those ghosts crossed the gate of hell, Granny Nether Mountain should have already sensed it. He did not know how angry that person would be now. Jiang Li was still wearing the purple vine shell. He pushed open the stone door in front of him and walked to the outside world. The place he was in just now was a tomb. After all, this was a graveyard. It was already quite good to have a clean and tidy tomb to rest in. When they saw Lord Purple Vine come out, the two ghosts standing at the entrance of the tomb immediately bowed to him. However, Jiang Li felt that it would be even better if they had a little more respect on their faces. For some reason, Granny Nether Mountain did not allow the remaining 7 demons to leave the Back Yin Mountain or even this graveyard. They even specially sent out ghosts to monitor them. If not for that, how could Fengdu City deal with the power of the Back Yin Mountain so easily? This was because they, who had reached the Demon King realm, had the ability to escape the Back Yin Mountain and move freely. If he really faced these guys head-on, even a high-grade Divine Judgment faction might not be able to withstand it. It seemed that Granny Nether Mountain did not really trust the 7 of them. After the barbarian Stone Demon King attacked her, this suspicion became much deeper. Even Jiang Li was very careful when he sent away the Four Hands children. He separated a trace of the flames from them and was not discovered. Jiang Li walked out of the tomb. On the stage in the distance, the sounds of the opera had long stopped. What replaced it was an ugly and angry voice. "You're saying that 30,000 ghosts and demons are gone. They only went to capture a mere 8,000 Four Hands. Not only did they not succeed, they even disappeared under our noses." Under her anger, Granny Nether Mountain's voice overlapped like waves, making it harder and harder to tell if she was male or female. However, the different voices mixed in the voices were all furious. "Grandma, I'll go look for them again. I'll definitely find them this time." In front of the stage, A black robe floated in the air. It was like the sound of a wind blowing through the canyon, and it could not help but tremble in fear. However, what answered it was only a black light. The black light pierced through the chest and back, and a huge hole immediately appeared in the middle of the black robe. Inside, a black wind spread out, leaving only the tattered black robe on the spot. It was no different from a piece of trash. On the side, there were already several black robes lying there. A whirlwind surged, and black fog covered the surroundings. These black-robed figures were the monsters formed from the whirlwind on the Back Yin Mountain, known as Rush Feet. This kind of demon was very fast and was the best messenger scout. However, these Rush Feet followed the human Qi and Yin Qi in the wind, and had already run through all the places where the Four Hands and the Yin Mountain ghosts might appear, but they found nothing. The aura that disappeared into thin air made it impossible for them to find it. However, their master, Granny Nether Mountain, would not understand their helplessness. After hearing this information, Rush Feet were sent out one after another and were killed in anger after failure. Coupled with the one who had just died, 7 of the rare Rush Feet had already died in front of the stage. Jiang Li, who was watching this scene from afar, felt a little heartache. If she killed more of these rare spirit monsters, they would go extinct. After a total of 7 times, Granny Nether Mountain finally accepted reality and no longer sent scouts to investigate. At this moment, another black robe that was filled with whirlwinds flew down from the mountain. This Rush Feet was not sent down the mountain to search, but to scout the way up. The Rush Feet landed in front of the stage and quickly muttered something. Granny Nether Mountain's expression finally eased a little. Chapter 560, Crossing Life and Death 2. The lucky whirlwind spirit was not slapped to death. A moment later, dense gong sound sounded on the stage. It was Granny Nether Mountain summoning them. On the 6 tombs near Jiang Li, the stone doors opened one after another, and the other 6 Demon King-level monsters walked out. They looked at each other. These monsters who could trample a mountain with a stomp of their feet had solemn expressions. Nothing good would happen at this time. However, they did not dare to disobey the call of that granny, and could only gather in front of the stage again. We'll cross the Back Yin Mountain with Granny. Although the other 6 demons who had long guessed it were already mentally prepared, their faces were still pale. They all looked at Jiang Li with anger and helplessness. If not for this guy being so meddlesome and sending himself to the doorsteps of the tragic Death City, how could Granny Nether Mountain have nothing to do and pull them over the mountain? After crossing the Back Yin Mountain, they would be dead. No living being would like to experience the feeling of death. Moreover, death that crossed the Back Yin Mountain could be reversed by crossing in the opposite direction. However, it was easy to go from life to death, but difficult to go from death to life. This was the rule of heaven and earth. It was not so easy to crawl back from the other side of the Back Yin Mountain. There were still conditions to cross the boundary of life and death to revive. If they died this time, they might not be able to come back alive. However, they could not reject this. Granny Nether Mountain was not asking for their opinion. She shook a bell beside her hand, and the stage in front of her seemed to come alive as it directly rose from the ground. A figure below broke through the ground and stood up. The person holding the stage was the barbarian stone demon king, who had been captured by everyone. At this moment, 18 of the 36 nails on his body had been taken out. That did not mean freedom. In its place was a root that covered his entire body like a nerve network. A dignified demon king, a monster that was comparable to an earth immortal expert, was being controlled like a puppet. When the remaining 7 demons saw this scene, their expressions were ugly. If they dared to refuse now, they would probably end up like this. After crossing the Back Yin Mountain, there was still a chance to revive. If they died here, there would really be no chance. The 7 of them, including Jiang Li, jumped onto the barbarian stone demon king's body and rode this rock giant towards the highest point of the Back Yin Mountain range. On the Back Yin Mountain peak, at the boundary of yin-yang and life and death. Today, a rock hand suddenly climbed up. Immediately after, a huge rock head with a stage above it poked its head out from the mountaintop that was tens of thousands of feet high. The barbarian stone demon king was very large. It could cross a mountain in 2 steps. This back yin mountain was originally occupied by them, so it was naturally impossible for anything to happen along the way. In less than half a day, they had already arrived at the highest point of the mountain range and saw the boundary between the 2 worlds. The yin-yang qi that rose from both sides of the back yin mountain collided with each other in front of him, forming a belt of light that was like an aurora. On the other side of the belt of light, countless eyes seemed to be staring at them in the darkness. At this moment, the barbarian stone demon king's half hand had already crossed the line of light, and the half hand that crossed it visibly turned gray. Even if it was a rock, one could clearly see which side was filled with vitality and which side was deathly silent. "What are you waiting for? Cross over." She was already a ghost, so Granny Nether Mountain was naturally not afraid of this. He shook the bell in his hand and urged the rock giant to continue forward. The barbarian stone demon king was controlled and could not refuse the order. The other 7 demon kings lying on the stone giant also had solemn expressions. They could only helplessly close their eyes and wait for death. On the other hand, from the tips of Jiang Li's fingers, 10 black lines had already spread from his hands to his chest. They were only a hair's breadth away from intersecting at his heart. What followed was a dense aura of death. Facing imminent death, his body was involuntarily trembling violently. It was the instinctive fear of death as a living creature. However, unlike the instinctive fear in his body, a large amount of spiritual qi was surging endlessly in Jiang Li's qi, and he was extremely excited. He sat cross-legged in the vine demon's body. The 9 Nether Dao scripture that was the foundation was circulating crazily. The 9 Nether Wood was originally a spiritual root of the Netherworld. The 9 Nether Dao scripture naturally contained the mystery of life and death. If one cultivated such a cultivation method and did not die once, how could they truly comprehend its profundity? He took a deep breath and pressed it in his stomach. As the stone giant took a step forward, the light belt that was the boundary between life and death. Jiang Li and the 8 demons of the Netherworld shook at the same time. The 10 black lines on Jiang Li's chest completely intersected. It was like a chain that bound his life, instantly tightening. The powerful heart stopped beating at that moment. Jiang Li only felt that the temperature in his entire body was quickly disappearing. In the blink of an eye, it was already cold. His skin turned gray, and his pupils were dim and turbid. It was difficult to see any signs of a living person. Even his mental world had withered. It was like the end of the world without any vitality. The chains formed by the 10 black threads firmly bound Jiang Li's vitality, stripping away everything that his life should have bit by bit. Then Jiang Li felt as if a certain part of his body had been cut by a large pair of scissors. A tearing pain caused all his vitality to completely disappear. At the same time, he seemed to have lost something very important. After recalling the terrible experience of death, Jiang Li looked around blankly for a moment. Soon he understood what he had lost. Under the moonlight, there was no longer a shadow under the feet of the 8 Nether Mountain demons. 8 shadows were floating away from them. The shadow of the purple vine demon was formed by the shadows of countless vines. They were not a complete life. When they were alive, they could still snuggle up and cooperate. Now, they had become shadows and were about to fall apart. In the gap of the growing long shadow, a shadow that was completely identical to Jiang Li's figure was vaguely revealed. All of Jiang Li's vitality was hidden in his shadow. This was what he had to experience when crossing the back yin mountain. That life and death boundary could cut off the vitality of the living and even tear apart their souls and shadows. The shadows no longer followed the people. Instead, they parted ways and lingered in this huge mountain range with the original lives of the living. The things that looked at them on the other side of the line were shadows left behind by the people who had crossed the Back Yin Mountain in the past. If the travelers who died after crossing the Back Yin Mountain wanted to revive, he had to find his shadow on the Back Yin Mountain and cross back to the Yang world with it to take back his life. However, the shadow that had left his body would no longer wait for him obediently like before. The Back Yin Mountain was so huge. If he wanted to find his shadow inside, it was undoubtedly like finding a needle in a haystack. During this process, if his shadow was killed and swallowed by other shadows, he would really have nowhere to cry. Moreover, the longer it took, the more independent the shadow that left the main body would be. It was even possible that it would eventually develop into an independent life and permanently separate from the traveler. At that time, the dead would forever be dead. Taking such a huge risk, Jiang Li was still willing to cross the Back Yin Mountain. It was not only because of the temptation of benefits. Most importantly, he still had something to rely on. On his fingertips, the 3,000 broken-winged black mosquitoes lying on the ground died the moment they crossed the Back Yin Mountain. At the instant they died, Jiang Li's last parallel mind seized the opportunity to devour the tiny souls of the 3,000 mosquitoes in time, causing them to really die completely. This most special parallel mind also returned to Jiang Li's consciousness. The pain of his soul being torn apart was immediately soothed by the rapidly circulating Bodhisattva Heart Sutra. At this moment, Jiang Li did not have the time to comprehend the memories of the broken-winged black mosquitoes brought back by his parallel mind. After randomly intercepting a portion of the memories, he sent out this parallel mind. It directly entered the shadow that had just been torn apart.